Chapter 291. As soon as Vice finished his sarcasm, the fighter jet chased after them even more closely. The distance between the two sides was slowly closing in. However, even when they were within 50 meters of each other, the fighter jet still didn't attack with its hot weapons, as if it was worried about something. Let me tell you. There's a 99% chance that they won't launch a missile. We're on a helicarrier right now. If the helicarrier is destroyed, it will indirectly destroy the Insight plan. Vice, who had transformed into a transformer, was fearless. He converted the radio frequency into a normal voice and communicated with Steve, who was in the pilot's seat, and Natasha, who was on his palm. "You make it sound like we're the villains," Natasha retorted angrily. "Destroying the helicarrier is indeed a solution, but the city of New York is right below us. If 3 helicarriers crash, it will still be a catastrophe." Steve shook his head and analyzed calmly. "I know, no wonder Master said you." Vice started to argue and stopped halfway. It should be said that Steve was indeed a hero with a sense of humanity and justice. He always put the safety of human beings first in everything he did and took action. Compared to Kyle, who used violence to curb violence, Steve was simply the opposite of the straightforward Kyle. Vice's mobile phone was made by Howard, the Tinder life was given by Kale, and the armor knowledge was taught by Tani. The data code of its mechanical soul had been deeply imprinted with the three people's values and values. It felt like there was nothing that money and power couldn't solve. If there was, then it would add more money and increase its power. Vice was still thinking when it heard the sound of air turbulence from the back of its head. The smart system's alarm sounded loudly. Its huge mechanical body curled up into a ball, and with quick reflexes, it did a gorgeous roll on the spot. Boom. A missile with a blazing tail flew over Vice's head and landed on the deck of the helicarrier not far away. The ground exploded into a terrifying wave of dust and fire. Vice quickly stood up and opened its mechanical palms. Natasha, who was kneeling on one knee, stood up and straightened her chest. The fire in front of her was reflected in her beautiful eyes. Her bright red short hair was blown up by the shockwave caused by the explosion. Natasha raised her eyebrows and said to Vice, "Your 1% chance happened. They really launched the missile without caring about the safety of the helicarrier." "It's not them, it's him," Vice refuted. A silver fighter jet rushed at the front of the fleet. The cockpit could be seen through the windshield. The pilot was a blond young man with a metal left arm. Steve also saw this scene through the video feed. He couldn't help but say softly, "It's Baki." He still caught up. Vice didn't care so much. He turned around and raised his mechanical arm. The cannon on his left hand charged for a short while and fired a huge laser bullet. The silver fighter jet was alerted and dodged to the side like an eagle. The laser bullet grazed the wing and missed, but it hit another fighter at the back, accidentally destroying it on the spot. The fighter jet fell with thick smoke and turned into a fireball on the helicarrier's deck. The fighter jets beside it could only speed up and go around it. Bucky, who was in the cockpit, was cold and emotionless. He maneuvered the silver fighter quickly. He aimed and fired 2 more missiles, one from the left and one from the right, and rushed towards Weiss. "They're here," Natasha exclaimed. "You don't have to tell me. I know." The cannon on his left hand was still smoking. Vice took a few steps back and quickly switched to his right hand to charge. He calculated the trajectory and timing of the missiles accurately and intercepted the 2 incoming missiles with a single laser bullet. Boom! The powerful collision between the missiles and the laser bullet exploded in the air between Vice and the silver fighter jet. In just an instant, the explosive waves and light waves were like tidal waves, violently slapping in all directions, so much so that everything within a 50-meter radius was pushed outwards by the shockwaves. In the storm formed by the explosion, the helicarrier was shaken and sank. The fighter jets in the air stagnated and retreated slightly. The unlucky ones were even blown away by the super-strong cyclone. At the same time, there was a turbulence in the black and gray shockwave. The roar of the engine was accompanied by the roar of the engine. The next moment, a broken yellow car full of bullet holes rushed out of the explosion range and rushed toward the helicarrier's deck. In the car, Steve and Natasha were sitting in the driver's seat. Both of them were still in a daze. Why did it change back? Steve was confused. Most of his technological knowledge was still stuck in World War II. It was difficult for him to understand the actual situation of mechanical armor technology. Natasha took a deep breath and asked, "That's right. The energy cannon is so powerful. Why didn't you take care of the fighter jets behind you first?" "Let me tell you a piece of bad news. I'm almost out of battery," Vice explained straightforwardly. "What did you say?" The 2 people in the car were stunned. They subconsciously looked at the rearview mirror. Under the lead of the silver fighter jets, more than a dozen fighter jets continued to chase after the car through the explosion. It was a race of life and death. But this time, it was a helicarrier 1,000 meters above the ground. More than 10 advanced fighter jets were chasing after an old yellow car. This was the first time something like this had ever happened on Earth. You're saying that you're out of battery at such a critical moment? Natasha was speechless. Vice sighed like a human and said helplessly, the conversion rate of krypton to electricity is too low. Plus, the incomplete transformer mode consumes a lot of energy. Even if the entire krypton is used up after firing almost 10 energy bombs, it's almost depleted. It's already good that I can maintain my car mode and not return to my original form. Then now. Before Steve could finish his sentence, he heard a thud. It was as if something heavy had landed on the roof of the car. Vice notified, a Birdman is back. Birdman? Is it Sam? Steve was shocked. It's me. A black uncle was lying on the roof of the car. He was wearing sunglasses. He poked his head out of the windshield and tapped on the window. Did you find the control panel to reset the carrier's system? Steve asked. He still had the chip to restart the carrier. I found it. It's right below the carrier, but I don't have permission to enter. Sam's face was extremely serious. He quickly said, also, a helicopter just flew towards the carrier with the director of SHLD on board. I couldn't intercept it midway because there were fighter jets escorting it. Thank you for your hard work, Steve replied. He then asked Vice urgently, do we still have reinforcements? Usually we would, but now everyone else is. Vice's answer came to an abrupt end. He said with a trembling voice, reinforcements are here. Chapter 292. Under the bright golden sunlight, the metal of the aircraft carrier reflected the gloomy metallic light. Following the dream, little Viaggi. Launder the pursuit of the fighter fleet, the little yellow car carrying Steve and the others was driving at a terrifying speed that was several times faster than the speed limit. Faint electric sparks surrounded the entire car, the engine and exhaust pipe were already red hot, and the four wheels were constantly emitting smoke and sparks. The front of the car was slightly lifted by the strong wind, and it looked like it was about to soar into the blue sky. Sam retracted a pair of mechanical wings, flipped down and entered the back seat through the open door. Reinforcements? That's great, how many? One person. Huh. After a short conversation, the car that continued to move at high speed fell into a long silence again. The silence was completely broken only when the fighter fleet collectively launched a missile attack. The rear of the car seemed to have eyes, either dodging left and right or drifting at high speed. The missiles missed and bombarded the deck of the aircraft carrier, and the dense and powerful bombardment turned the steel floor within a 30-meter radius into a sea of fire. Although the car was not directly hit by the missiles, the outer shell of the car was still ravaged beyond recognition, and the burnt parts were still flashing with electric sparks. The deck of the aircraft carrier was severely damaged, and there were several large holes that could be seen inside the aircraft carrier. We can't just keep running like this, Sam said with a frown. You're right, if no one stops Director Pierre and restarts the aircraft carrier program, we'll still lose in the end. Natasha nodded in agreement. The fighter fleet behind us is too troublesome, we have to think of a way to deal with it first. Steve said calmly, but there was anxiety between his eyebrows, and his brain was racking its brain to think of a solution. Hey, didn't I tell you that we have reinforcements coming soon? Vice reminded again, paused and then quickly changed his words. Not coming soon. They're already here. Behind the car, the steel belly of a fighter that was about to launch a missile suddenly broke open, as if something sharp had pierced into it, and then the fighter plane was cut in half. Flames and thick smoke spurted out from the fracture. The upper and lower fuselage flipped at high speed and crashed onto the deck below. The missile also caused a second explosion, blasting a tragic black hole in the aircraft carrier's hull. The reversal happened too quickly. Not only were the other pilots shocked, but even Steve and the others who had been alerted earlier. Whoosh! The black stream of light that pierced through the fighter jet slowed down and stopped in the air between the car and the fighter jet. It was a tall dark creature. Its bulging muscles were extremely domineering and wild. Its long and narrow scarlet eyes looked down coldly at the group of fighters. When its gaze fell on the little yellow car, it could not help but shrug its shoulders. Vice's deformed car came to a sudden stop. Its four wheels rubbed against the deck fiercely, and it slowly came to a stop amidst the exaggerated splashing of sparks. The moment the car stopped, it was as if it had been scrapped. The wheels were all flattened, and more than half of the engine had melted into molten iron. The entire car was emitting hot steam. Steve and the rest coughed as they got out of the car. They looked up at the dark creatures that had turned the tide of the battle. That creature destroyed an F-22 fighter jet? Sam slapped himself lightly and covered his painful face. After eliminating the dream, he opened his mouth even more in disbelief. He also had mechanical wings and could fly freely. However, asking him to fight a fighter jet head-on was undoubtedly suicide. Advanced fighter jets were the technological weapons that humans used to conquer the blue sky on Earth and defend the supremacy of the air. But it was destroyed by an unknown dark creature with bare hands? Vice, why didn't you say so earlier? That person is the reinforcement. Natasha recognized the identity of the reinforcement and was the first to breathe a sigh of relief. She patted her heart that was still beating quickly to comfort it. What is that? Steve asked in surprise. When he saw the dark creature, he had a faint sense of familiarity. However, because he had not seen the mode of Venom's full coverage, he did not associate it with the people he knew. Vice got out of the scrapped car and jumped onto Steve's shoulder. He said firmly and respectfully, "That is Master." "Master? You said that is Kale?" Steve froze and stared at the dark creature in the air. As if noticing his gaze, the dark creature lowered its eyes and said with a slightly hoarse voice, "What happened to you? Why are you in such a sorry state?" "I can't help it. I'm an antique. I can't keep up with the pace of the new era." Steve shrugged and said self-deprecatingly, "Leave this to me. You guys go and intercept Alexander Pierce. While you're at it, restart the system program of the aircraft carrier." As soon as Kale finished speaking, a missile quickly flew towards him. He turned his head and the muscles in his left hand swelled into a black hammer. "Don't you know the rules? You interrupted me." Without dodging, Kale lightly swung the hammer in his left hand and smashed the missile in front of him. Boom. Not sure if it was the missile self-destructing or the heavy hammer, the turbulent blast wave covered Kale's body and buried it. With a flap of his wings, the strong wind blew away the blast wave and the fog. Kale floated in the air unscathed. Black smoke flowed from the heavy hammer and the wreckage of a missile fragment in his other hand. Tearing the fighter with his bare hands and shaking the missile head-on, in the face of this extraordinary ability, everyone's brain was in a state of chaos. And this was just the beginning. "Here you go." Kale released the palm of his right hand and the wreckage fell naturally. His right foot was raised back and the strength of his whole body gathered naturally. He kicked the metal wreckage out like a football. It was just a piece of metal wreckage, but at this time, under the kick of more than 10 tons of force, it turned into a different kind of metal cannonball. In the blink of an eye, it crossed a distance of 50 meters and collided with the silver fighter that was still accelerating forward. The silver fighter had already dodged in advance, but it was only grazed by the high-speed metal wreckage. Half of the wing burst and broke on the spot. The out-of-control silver fighter flew diagonally downwards. When it was 10 meters above the deck, the protective hatch of the cockpit opened and the Winter Soldier jumped out from the pilot's seat. Rumble. The fall and explosion of the silver fighter caused the aircraft carrier, which had been bombarded by missiles and was riddled with holes, to sink to a height of 10 meters. Under the deterrence of the terrifying strength, the other pilots were scared out of their wits. They turned around and retreated, maintaining a safe distance at high altitude. This was Kale's overwhelming dominance now. He was the overlord of the Earth, the god of the Earth. The Winter Soldier fell on the deck and rolled a few times in a row to unload the force. It stood up expressionlessly like a robot and stared coldly at Steve and the others in front of it. But a black shadow passed by. Steve and the others looked carefully. Kale was already standing in front of them, facing the Winter Soldier. "Kale?" Steve took a step forward nervously and put his hand on Kale's strong waist muscles. Kale understood Steve's intention and said straightforwardly, "I understand what you mean. No one is going to fight with you for the Baki. You can deal with it yourself." "Thank you." Steve nodded, holding the Adaman shield, passed by Kale and walked step by step toward the Baki. "One attack and one defend." Kale shook his head and whispered, turning to look at the rest of the people behind him. Chapter 293. Master. Vice, who was in the form of a small machine, hopped to Kale's feet and stopped. It then bowed and saluted in a gentlemanly manner. A piece of krypton with a full energy value is enough to support the interstellar spaceship of Planet Soccer to travel through the Milky Way. It can sustain Tawny steel armor for an entire day. It can be converted into electricity to power New York City for 10 minutes. Why is it depleted so quickly on your body? Kale glanced at it and scolded it. He then raised his hand and took out a blue item card. He converted the card into a brand new krypton crystal and threw it to the ground beside his feet. Vice's eyes lit up. It did not care about its gentlemanly manner anymore. It excitedly pounced forward and caught the glowing krypton crystal. It opened its mouth and stuffed it into the black machine's teeth. Vice was lying on the deck of the aircraft carrier. It used the krypton crystal in its hands as food. It chewed it into energy crystals and swallowed them to replenish the energy of its body that was about to be shut down. What a waste. Kale shook his head helplessly. Just one piece of krypton crystal was enough to empty the pockets of the rich people on Earth. Vice Transformer mode was purely a waste of money. It used money to crush the opponent to death. Fortunately, Kale had a huge stockpile of krypton crystals that numbered in the tens of thousands. "Greetings, Master." Natasha pulled Sam's arm and took a step forward. She then knelt on one knee on the deck and saluted respectfully. Mr. Kale." Sam scratched his head. He had not gotten used to the fact that the dark creature that symbolized murder and evil was actually a legendary hero that everyone respected as a symbol of peace. The symbol of peace and the dark creature represented two extremes. Yet they were the same person. "Master, this is the program chip to restart the aircraft carrier. Fry gave it to Steve." "Steve just gave it to me," Natasha reported as she opened her clenched fist. There were 3 green chips lying in her palm. Each chip corresponded to one aircraft carrier. All 3 chips had to be inserted into the control panel of the aircraft carrier for it to take effect. "Is this the key to resolving Operation Insight?" Kale muttered coldly. He reached out his hand and picked up the programming disk with 2 fingers. Under the shocked gazes of Natasha and Sam, Kale exerted force in his fingers and crushed the chip into powder. "Master, why are you doing this?" Natasha widened her beautiful eyes in surprise. "Vice is enough. We don't need the chip's cumbersome method of rebooting the aircraft carrier," Kale said calmly. Natasha and Sam looked at Vice, who was still chewing on her corium. Vice seemed to have woken up from a dream and explained, "That's right. I forgot to tell you that as long as I have enough energy and am on an aircraft carrier, I can directly control the satellite and modify the system commands of the aircraft carrier." As she spoke, 2 antennas extended from Vice's forehead. She dug her feet into the steel of the aircraft carrier's deck. Faint electric sparks extended from the deck to the interior of the aircraft carrier. Her mechanical eyes flashed as a series of codes flashed past. A torrent of data was running at a high speed. 3 seconds later, Vice clapped her hands and said, "All right, the aircraft carrier we're on now belongs to me." "That's it?" Natasha and Sam looked at each other speechlessly. They had been busy dealing with this difficult task and she had solved 1/3 of it so quickly? "You don't believe me?" Vice raised her mechanical chest proudly. Without energy she was indeed a piece of scrap metal. However, she had just chewed on corium and was fully charged. To Earth, Vice was a unique and extraordinary artificial intelligence that was above the top technology. Earth's satellite? The radio waves could follow the aircraft carrier's signal trajectory and cross the satellite's protective wall. She could forcefully modify the aircraft carrier's system commands. Then, at this stage of time, what kind of power would the helicopter aircraft carrier, which was publicly built by Earth's top technology, be? Kale thought to himself. He grinned coldly and licked his lips. "Vice, try it. Right away. But how do we do it?" Vice shook her head excitedly. She looked up at the fighter jets hovering in the air and suddenly realized that they were the best experimental targets. "I've never seen the power of an aircraft carrier before." Vice's antennas were raised. The aircraft carrier that had been bombarded by missiles and was riddled with holes started to vibrate violently under the command. The cannons on the aircraft carrier's hull started to operate as if they had a temper. The cannons were automatically calibrated and quickly aimed at the fighter jets hovering diagonally above. Counting down. 3, 2, 1. Fire. Vice looked like a commander and said with authority. Following its words, the heavily damaged aircraft carrier that was on the verge of collapse transformed into a super-large Gatling gun. Hundreds of cannons fired at the same time according to the command. Bang, bang, bang. Countless cannonballs and missiles flew out, dragging long trails of flames and smoke behind them. They formed a destructive cannonball rain that covered an area of 100 meters in the sky. And that 100-meter area was the observation area where the enemy fighter jets were circling. Everything happened too quickly. The remaining 9 fighter jets didn't have enough time to dodge or escape. They were instantly drowned by the cannonballs. The blue sky was filled with smoke and the white clouds were torn apart. The explosion spread out and covered half of the sky above New York City. At noon that day, the people in New York could clearly see the explosion clouds that were more beautiful than fireworks if they looked up. Sam said emotionally, "With such power, it's no wonder the 3 helicarriers could destroy the elites of humanity in such a short time." After all, if they spent a few years secretly building this, Natasha said matter-of-factly. Its firepower isn't inferior to the space fighter jets. It's just that the helicarriers are too cumbersome. Cale couldn't help but grin when he thought of this. One shouldn't be too greedy. It didn't matter if it was cumbersome or not. The aircraft carrier wasn't meant to be agile and fight alone. It was meant to be a mobile giant base fortress and a transit station. "Vice, pass down the system's command and drive this aircraft carrier out of New York," Cale ordered. "Are we not going to take this aircraft carrier?" Vice asked. "It's already heavily damaged. What's the point of keeping it? Let's go steal a new one." Cale looked up and looked at the other 2 helicarriers that were still in good condition 100 meters away. "Master, we're not stealing it. It's ours to begin with." Natasha smiled. "Don't make it sound like we're villains." "But why do I feel so excited?" Sam said with a bitter smile. Unlike Steve's cautious approach, Cale's pace could be described with one word: exhilarating. Chapter 294. It's almost over. In the full state of Venom symbiosis, Cale's tone was cold, without a trace of humanity or emotion. Coupled with the dark appearance and violent style of doing things, he really looked like a demon from hell. Natasha and Sam stood respectfully behind him, fully obedient, waiting for Cale to issue orders. "Master, now that the aircraft carrier has crashed out of New York, what should the 2 people who are still on it do?" While Vice raised the question, several people looked at the deck that was bombarded by shells and crashed fighter jets. Smoke and flames raged in the air, the steel holes caused by the missile bombardment, and the wreckage of the fighter jets flew everywhere. Among them there were 2 tall blonde young men. One held a Adaman shield that could absorb kinetic energy, and the other relied on a mechanical technological arm that could strike with several tons of impact force. They were entangled with each other fiercely, and it was difficult to tell who had the upper hand. Their sweat and blood spilled on the steel floor around them. You don't have to worry about the battle between Steve and Baki. The bond between the 2 of them is too deep, and they have been through life and death together. Even if Bucky is brainwashed, his subconscious will not kill Steve. Cale saw through it. The comradeship between the 2 has been verified for more than half a century. The best interpretation of love-hate relationship was probably just like this. Cale waved his hand and said coldly to Vice, "Issue a program command to let the aircraft carrier fly out of New York and land and self-destruct when it reaches an uninhabited and remote suburb. Neither of them are ordinary people and they won't die so easily." "Yes, Master." Vice nodded and immediately erected the antenna and edited the aircraft carrier's autopilot route. "Isn't this too casual?" Natasha and Sam looked at each other and mourned for Steve for 3 seconds in their hearts. The aircraft carrier trembled slightly and no longer continued to rise into the sky. It left the original triangular area and accelerated out of New York. "First ship, 2 more to go. Let's go." Cale's face was indifferent as he extended a pair of dark wings. After Vice climbed onto his strong left shoulder, he jumped up and stomped heavily on the ground. 2 clear footprints appeared on the steel deck. It was accompanied by a sharp gust of wind and a sonic boom. Cale turned into a black stream of light and left the deck, heading straight for the 2nd helicarrier that served as the connecting hub. On the original aircraft carrier. "Baki, wake up. I'm Steve. Have you forgotten about me?" Steve fought while using words to escape. Unfortunately, the Winter Soldier was unmoved. The 5 fingers of the mechanical metal material clasped together, and the left arm bombarded the shield with the help of technology. The shield absorbed more than half of the kinetic energy, but Steve still couldn't bear it and kept retreating, only stopping when he reached a hole in the deck. The raging flames couldn't stop the Winter Soldier, whose heart was as cold as ice. He approached expressionlessly, wanting to kill the enemy in front of him who made his mind ripple with memories. 30 meters away from the battle between the 2, Sam asked Natasha, "Are we really going to leave Captain Steve like this?" Natasha's lips opened slightly and she said softly, "Master is right. This is a battle and battlefield that belongs to the captain. It's not convenient for us to intervene. Believe in him. He has survived all kinds of wars and difficulties. There's no reason for him to lose to his own people." "Well, I believe in him too." Sam clenched his hands slightly and pressed the control button tied to his palm. The metal backpack on his back immediately unfolded steel wings, slightly flapping the hot and cold air around him. "Let's go, hold on tight." Sam took the initiative to reach out his left hand. Natasha held Sam's hand and said in a deep voice, "Master is going to the second helicarrier. Let's go and see the situation first." Okay. The engine of the mechanical wing started and Sam's feet left the deck. He pulled Natasha away from the first aircraft carrier and chased after the trajectory of Kale's flight. The helicarrier with billowing smoke and flames carried Steve and the Winter Soldier towards the direction of the sun that was about to set in the mountains and rivers in the west. At an altitude of 2,000 meters, the second helicarrier, next to the central console. The helicopters were parked next to each other on the deck, and 4 armed men with guns surrounded the console, paying high attention to the surroundings. In the protective area formed by them, Pierre stood alone in front of the console, his hands quickly tapping on the keyboard for personal control. Like Vice, he wanted to modify the program instructions. According to Hydra's original Insight plan, the helicarrier needs to climb to a height close to the atmosphere before Hydra can start the operation. A large number of targets in the American region will be locked onto a large area and a large number of targets for long-range and accurate bombardment. But now the ascent height has not been reached, the operation has not been officially started, and many of Hydra's bases have been destroyed. Pierre even took off his suit jacket, and the white shirt he wore was wet with sweat. His face full of hatred and resentment was slightly distorted, and his fingers tapped hard on the console keyboard. "Kale, the symbol of peace, you forced me to do this. I must use the entire city of New York to be buried with the brothers of Hydra." Pierre roared in his heart, approaching the final stage of reprogramming the instructions. When it was about to be completed, a radio wave suddenly impacted and transmitted from the floor into the console. White electric sparks burst out from the keyboard and splashed out. Pierre was shocked. He retracted his hands, wiped his eyes and looked at the computer screen again. He saw the ace of the demon cards appear there with a funny mechanical smiley face. At the same time, there was a dull sound of something falling behind him, as if something had landed on the deck of the aircraft carrier. Pierce turned his head stiffly and saw the muscular dark creature crouching on the steel floor of the deck. He felt as if his body and mind were about to fall into a sub-zero freezer as long as his eyes met with the creature's scarlet eyes. The symbol of peace is here. The 4 armed men subconsciously pulled the trigger, and the enhanced version of modern firearms fired. Blue flames flickered on the muzzles of the guns, and the bullets turned into small laser beams, shooting holes in the steel of the deck. However, when the steel bullets hit Kyle's tough and shiny black venom skin, all of them bounced off ineffectually and fell to the ground with a crisp tinkling sound, forming a stark contrast that made people shudder. "Kneel," Kale said coldly. His sharp eyes swept across and the 4 armed men did not resist. Under some kind of strong pressure, they let go of the guns, bent their knees and crawled on the ground in fear, unable to move. "Alexander Pierre, what else do you have? If you don't use it now, you won't have the chance." Kale stood in place and looked down at Pierre on the console with a hint of mockery and playfulness on his face. Now, except for the Ancient One, he was invincible on Earth. Pierre clenched his fist stubbornly. He was the interim leader of Hydra and the current director of SHELD. No matter what situation he faced, he would not lose his calm, let alone bow his head and retreat. But at this moment, looking at Kale in front of him, he was an invincible enemy. Pierre's teeth began to chatter, and the muscles all over his body began to tremble involuntarily. Even his noble and unyielding soul began to tremble. Chapter 295. Am I afraid? The muscles on Pierre's face twisted slightly, and his hands pressed his chin in a panic, as if he was trying to stop his teeth from making an ugly sound. Unfortunately, even his palms were trembling up and down with his chin, and every inch of his body was instinctively showing various characteristics of fear. Sweat soaked his shirt and dripped on the hot deck floor, and a few wisps of white steam rose with a sizzling sound. Lost, completely lost. As long as this man exists, the Hydra organization will never have a chance to turn over, and can only hide in a dark and gloomy corner to survive. Pierre smiled sadly and like the other 4 armed guards, he knelt down facing Kale, who was covered in venom. He was not affected by the coercive ability with force field traction, but because he could not see the future of the Hydra organization, his belief as a spiritual pillar collapsed and he knelt down. The dim light of the setting sun fell on Pierre's body, making him look more lonely and old, making him look like a complete stray dog. "Why didn't you do this earlier? You didn't have to do so many tricks. As long as you are on Earth, how can you escape?" Kale shook his head gently, and the strong and tough dark horny membrane on his body began to revert to a black liquid, which penetrated into the clothes below and disappeared and merged. After a while he returned to silver hair, golden eyes, a young and handsome face, and a tall and strong perfect human physique. Venom transformed into a spacious black trench coat and draped over Kale's body in casual clothes. There was no trace of blood, even if it was stained with blood. Kale was like a gentleman who came to a banquet, and there was no sense of déjà vu of killing people like crushing ants. Kale smiled and stepped forward, saying, Red Skull should feel lucky that he touched the tesseract on the fighter, so he might have been exiled outside the earth with his life intact. He walked past the armed men. Under the pressure of his aura, the four of them were almost pressed against the floor. After a final struggle of self-respect, their heads tilted to the side, and white foam came out of their mouths as they fainted. Kale walked up to Pierre and stopped half a meter away from him. He looked down at the back of his head coldly. You can't kill me? Pierre didn't dare to raise his head, his voice trembling as he spoke. Reason? Kale shrugged. Pierre took a deep breath and forcefully pulled himself together. He gritted his teeth and said, Before this, I've already raised the suspicion that I might be framed and killed to the United Nations and the US Senators. This is a seed. If you kill me like this, then this seed will start to germinate and grow. Sooner or later, your inhumane demonic atrocities will be criticized and denied by the world. You're right. There is indeed such a hidden danger. Kale nodded in agreement and said with a smile, But you won't live to see that day. You're going to die here. If he was really the symbol of peace in the hearts of the people, perhaps he would really not kill the enemy, and eventually be punished and tried through the legal channels recognized by the people. Unfortunately, before the false identity of the symbol of peace, he was Kale who had transmigrated and reincarnated. What he did was right. If there was a mistake, then erase and eliminate this mistake. Kale was too lazy to continue the nonsense. He snapped his fingers and a golden flame ignited between his two fingers. The temperature within a few meters of him instantly increased by more than 10 degrees. You can't do this. Pierre's body trembled more intensely. Sensing that death was about to come, he couldn't help but shout hoarsely, Little ancestor, are you still not going to make a move? You said you would help me stop the symbol of peace. Now that I'm about to die, are you still not willing to show up? The slightly funny cry for help spread far and wide on the deck of the aircraft carrier high in the sky, but no one answered. Little ancestor? Kale frowned and looked around. On the second aircraft carrier, other than the 4 armed personnel who had fainted, there was no one else. Mental breakdown? Kale didn't think too much about it. Facing Pierre, he flicked his finger and flicked the golden flame away from his hand. The golden flame that looked like it would be extinguished by the wind contained the power of burning at high temperature. If it landed on a person's head, even the skull would be melted. Pierre held his head and crawled on the ground. The golden flame floated down, and the moment before it touched the back of his head, a subtle ripple that was close to transparent suddenly appeared in the air. The golden flame and the transparent ripple collided and were annihilated little by little until they disappeared without a trace. Who is it? Kale's face was cold and he quickly turned his head. He didn't know when, but there was a small dwarf, standing silently behind him. Less than a meter tall, thin, covered from head to toe in a black cloak, completely obscuring his appearance and true physique. It was impossible to tell whether he was human or alien. I finally meet you. The mysterious person seemed to be laughing, and let out a hoarse and ethereal voice. Are you from the Hydra organization? Kale asked coldly. Because the two were 5 meters apart, he couldn't see the ability card on the other party. But just now, the ability that easily extinguished the divine fire seemed to have a strong spatial aura. Yes, it was space. For Kale, who had come into contact with the dimensional stone, there was no mistaking it. It was a derivative ability of space. Mage? Mutant? Android who experimented with the tesseract? In a short moment, Kale had many guesses in his mind. The mysterious person had a pair of small eyes that seemed to be staring at Kale. He replied, I'm not a member of the Hydra organization. It's just that the uncle helped me find you and I promised to save his life. My mother once told me to never go back on my words and break my promise. Then didn't your mother tell you to be wary of your enemies? As soon as Kale finished speaking, he tapped the floor with the tip of his foot and rushed toward the mysterious person at an extremely fast speed, leaving behind a circle of faint white air waves. He was eager to make a move, not because of his strong desire to kill, but because he wanted to see the ability card on the other party. Space was supreme, time was king. Even the lowest of these two types of abilities was a divine skill that directly connected to the mysteries of the universe. This was also why the Ancient One could be the strongest guardian of the earth against the multiple invasions with the body of a mortal. Kale suddenly moved, but the mysterious person didn't retreat or dodge. Moreover, the two were only 5 meters apart. To read the card's information, one only needed to be within 3 meters, so these 2 meters were not a distance at all. But 10 seconds later, Kale was still rushing forward, and the distance between him and the mysterious person was still 5 meters. These short 5 meters were like the distance between heaven and earth. No matter how fast he ran, he couldn't close the distance by even a centimeter. Chapter 296. How is that possible? I didn't move. With a flash, Kale suddenly stopped and looked back to see Pierre still lying on the deck behind him. His heart trembled slightly. He looked at the mysterious man in front of him seriously and asked in a low voice, "Did you do that?" "I've been walking in the same place." "Not walking in the same place. You've already run almost 10,000 meters, but I've set up a very small spatial maze for you to go in and out of." The mysterious man also explained the principle seriously. He raised his hands in front of his chest and imitated the movements with his fingers. A scorching golden flame rushed over. The mysterious man waved his left hand, and the natural and smooth space rhythm moved. The flame was swallowed up by the blue space turbulence 3 meters away. The raging flames, the high temperature, and even the sound were calmed down by the spatial waves. "Who are you?" Kale asked with a more dignified look. The mysterious man's attainment in the use of space power had reached an incredible level. If Kale had the hanging ring, he could use space spells to attack. But now, he could not even get close to the mysterious man's body with his extraordinary power. This was the incomprehensible part of space power. It was one of the strongest abilities derived from the evolution of countless races. If he did not know the Ancient One's character, Kale would really think that the mysterious man in front of him was the Ancient One's bad taste. But at least the spells had some distinguishable gorgeous special effects. The mysterious man's use of space power was more like a derivative of the Tesseract and the Primordial Stone of Space. It was a pure and powerful space power. "The Primordial Stone of Space fell into your hands?" Kale frowned and continued to ask. This was the first time he met an enemy that made him so curious since he returned to Earth. "You have too many questions. I can't answer them even if I want to." The mysterious man curled his lips and said in a hoarse voice, "I don't like the environment here. Let's go somewhere else and I'll consider answering your questions." "Okay, anywhere is fine as long as it's within the range of Earth." Kale agreed immediately. Because he was skilled and bold, he was not afraid of the mysterious man's trap. "Then stand firm." The mysterious man opened his hands, and a faint blue spatial energy wrapped around his body rhythmically like the wind and extended 5 meters away. Kale raised his eyebrows slightly, allowing the familiar spatial energy to envelop him. He had the illusion of summoning the rainbow bridge to cross the universe. Kale was more certain that the mysterious man's ability had a lot to do with the Primordial Stone of Space. At the same time, he also felt a sense of familiarity spontaneously arising from it. "Who exactly are you?" Before Kale could finish his words, his figure flickered and disappeared from the deck of the second aircraft carrier together with the mysterious man. A cold wind blew across the vast deck. Other than the unconscious armed personnel, Pierre was the only one kneeling on the control panel. When Pierre did not hear the conversation, he tried to raise his head timidly, glanced around in surprise and murmured to himself in ecstasy, "Is he really gone?" After lying on the ground for a few seconds, Pierre stood up with difficulty after confirming that Kale had left. He patted the dust off his expensive suit and whispered in a happy and cold voice, "The symbol of peace. Letting me run away this time will be the biggest mistake in your life. Even if the Hydra organization is destroyed, one day I will make a comeback on my own." Pierre roared in his heart, anger and hatred condensed in his eyes, and ran toward the helicopter with renewed faith. Just then, the shadows of the two people were close to the deck, and there was a slight sound of something sharp cutting through the air. The steel wings folded slightly and landed. Natasha landed first, and then Sam folded his wings completely and landed on the deck of the second aircraft carrier. "Where is the master? Where did he go?" Natasha was slightly surprised and looked at the unconscious armed personnel on the ground. Looking at the bullet marks on the ground, it seems that there was a short battle here, but it ended quickly. "It should be Mr. Kale's doing," Sam said, his sharp eyes wandering around and seeing a person on the side. He was stunned and reached out to grab Natasha in front of him. "What's wrong?" Natasha turned sideways and looked in the direction of Sam's hint. Suddenly, her eyes met with Pierre, who had his hand on the helicopter and was ready to escape. The three of them stared at each other, and the scene was very strange for a moment. Pierre's face was unprecedentedly ugly, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. His body shrank into the cabin of the helicopter, and he said with a forced smile, "Well, I have something to do, so I'll leave first." Natasha and Sam looked at each other, and both of them showed a meaningful smile. They clenched their fists and stepped forward to surround the helicopter at the same time. "Why are you in such a hurry? Let's have a good chat, Director Pierre." "Deputy Director, let's talk nicely." On the deck of the second aircraft carrier, there were screams and screams that sounded like pigs being slaughtered, and they were transmitted to the distant sky in the high altitude of the setting sun. On the other side, Europe. A moment ago, it was still the deck of an aircraft carrier with cold wind and steel equipment everywhere. The next moment, he was already on the charming city streets with neon lights flashing in the night. The two styles of quiet and lively formed a sharp contrast. With a sense of unreality like a dream, Cale stood on the bustling street for half a second, and the vehicles and pedestrians on the road around him came and went like turbulent water. Fortunately, he had exited Venom's full coverage mode, otherwise with the terrifying appearance of the dark monster, it would cause panic as soon as he was teleported here. Another thing was that the mysterious person who teleported him here was gone. "Sir, are you okay?" A mustached gentleman in a black suit with embroidered flowers and a bow tie on his chest came forward and greeted him politely. "This is Dash." Cale looked up calmly and found himself in front of a luxurious building. "Sir, this is the Bird Club. Do you have a membership card here? If not, you can come in and learn more." The mustached gentleman responded politely. As a waiter of this high-end club, with more than 10 years of work experience, he had seen all kinds of rich and powerful people, but it was the first time he saw Cale's aura that seemed to be born strong. Bird Club? Cale's heart trembled, and some old memories were pried open, and some fragments flashed through his mind for no reason. The cards of roses, the late party, the embrace and the dance to the song. This is the Bird Club, it still exists after so long? Cale's voice was low, and there was a complicated expression on his face. "Yes, our Bird Club is the oldest high-end dance club in Europe. It was built in 1940 and has been renovated more than 10 times, and it has been preserved to this day. It is one of the most popular clubs for the aristocrats and the upper class in Europe." The mustached gentleman said proudly, "Rumor has it that during World War II, a legendary hero also came here as a customer." Cale did not listen but silently walked past him, step by step up the stairs and walked toward the grand door of the club. Chapter 297. The Tubio Club. The location of the building hadn't changed at all. Instead, it had expanded to both sides and looked more spacious than before. There were still steps and a red carpet in front of the club building. The entrance was still brightly lit and the atmosphere was pleasant. Inside the entrance, there was still a low-key and luxurious old-style reception desk and corridor. Stepping into it, people could experience the elegant atmosphere of the celebrities decades ago. "Sir? Sir?" Following the whiskered waiter all the way, Cale walked over the threshold in a trance. His eyes swept over all the familiar layout and items in the club. Since the last time he left here, not to mention this dance club, he hadn't even returned to Europe. In the blink of an eye, more than 60 years had passed. What was the meaning of "things remain the same but people have changed"? Things were still there and could be disguised by new things, but some people could no longer be seen and disappeared in the long river of time. This was the unavoidable sorrow of all living beings in the Marvel Universe, with the exception of a few races. "Why did you bring me here?" Facing the empty air, Cale whispered coldly and quietly clenched his 5 fingers. Now, there weren't many things that could touch his humanity, but coincidentally the Tubio Club was one of them. "Sir, I'll have to trouble you." 2 tall guards in suits with broad shoulders and strong waists stared vigilantly at Kyle, who was standing at the door in a daze. They stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right, wanting to stop him and drive him out. After all, the Tubio Club was a place for celebrities to socialize. People without a certain status and recommended by a member were not qualified to enter the door, let alone apply for a membership card. And people with a membership card, after a few years, they wouldn't make a mistake. The 2 doormen stepped forward and reached out their hands to Cale. But the next moment, all their movements were abruptly stopped. A strong and substantial pressure came crashing down like a huge mountain. Exhaling, Cale loosened his clenched fists, ignored the doormen on both sides, and continued to walk into the corridor with just the right lighting. He walked to the reception desk with a waitress. "Hello, sir." How can I help you? The waitress on duty turned pale and hurriedly greeted Kale. She secretly glanced at the two guards not far behind Kale. The two guards, who were retired elite Russian special forces, were barely supporting each other at this moment. They kept waving their hands to wipe the cold sweat on their foreheads, as if they had been frightened by something. What on earth happened that could scare the fearless Russian to this extent? Kale thought for a moment and said calmly to the waitress, "I want to check the spending records of membership card 006. He had come here for the mysterious man, but now, he wanted to ask another question. Membership card spending records? The waitress was stunned and said with a troubled expression, "I'm very sorry. Our computer system does not have the right to read the spending records of the membership cards. Moreover, the top 10 membership cards are the supreme membership cards specially made by our club. They will only be given to special members and guests. No one has the right to check the spending records of the card holders." System authority? What is this? Kale smiled and tapped the screen of the electronic watch with his finger. He shrugged and reminded, "Vice, it's your turn to play a role." "No problem, master." Vice agreed and extended an antenna to invade the host data of the building where the club was located with radio waves. "Sir, what are you?" The waitress was puzzled. Then, the lights at the reception desk, in the corridor, and even in the whole club building went out in an instant. The lights flashed a few times as if the wiring was faulty, and then they returned to normal. Then Vice's voice sounded again, "Found it, master." "Show it to me." Kale's eyes flickered, and he ordered in a low voice, "Broadcast it for you." Vice's eyes turned gloomily and projected a three-dimensional graph that clearly listed the spending records of the membership cards in numbers in English. Kale glanced at it roughly. The first record was the first spending record at the beginning of 1944, which was the day when Steve's fighter jet crashed into the ice and he came back to hold a late dance party. There were detailed records of the number of people and the amount of spending. The time of spending was only accurate to the day and year. It should have been a handwritten record by the staff, but it was later re-registered in the computer system after the computer was made available to the public. After that day, he gave the number 006 card to the waitress and asked her to give it to Paige Carter. Kale looked down and was slightly stunned. At the end of 1944, there were more than 30 spending records, all of which were records of Paige Carter's usage. At the end of 1944, the date of the last spending record was less than half a month away from the date of death recorded on Paige Carter's grave. It was hard to imagine that a woman who was dying of a serious illness would frequently come to the Bird Club almost every day. If there were no relatives or acquaintances of hers here, it meant that there were precious memories that she could not forget here. Carter. Kale muttered to himself. At this moment he remembered many things, and the last memory stopped at the parting with Carter. It was a farewell kiss under the setting sun at dusk. Kale shook his head slightly, withdrew his emotions, and rationally looked at the bottom of the recording image projected by Vice. From 1944 to 2007, there was a blank space. That was to say, after Carter's death, no one used the number 006 card to spend here. Until 2008. This year, this month, a day ago there was a spending record that had not ended until now. Who on earth used Carter's card? Kale did not have to think about it, and the figure of the mysterious man immediately appeared in his mind. Did you get a single room? 301. After reading the last bit of important information, Kale picked up the vice on the table and disappeared in a flash. He turned into a blurry black shadow and swept through the corridor quickly. The waitress opened her eyes wide as if she had seen a ghost. When she was about to scream, her mouth was covered by someone's big hand. While she was panicking, she took a closer look and found that it was her doorman who covered her mouth. They were two tall and strong Russian men. She calmed down a little. "What are you doing? Why didn't you stop that man just now?" The waitress asked confusedly. "Stop? How can we stop him?" One of the doormen said with a wry smile, "Haven't you recognized who he was just now?" "Who?" The waitress blinked. The other doorman patted his chest with lingering fear. "You keep talking about him all day long. It's the legend who came to the club during World War II." "No way?" The waitress was a little confused for a moment. After a moment of silence, she opened her mouth in surprise. "By the way, I even forgot such an important thing. Number 006 is the number that the Bird Club made for that person." Chapter 298. It took less than half a second for the elevator to reach the top floor. A black shadow passed through the luxurious corridors of the club and the lively ballroom. The spiral wooden staircase led straight to the third floor. Kale's face was cold. He stopped in front of the door of the first room. He didn't even look at the door number before he turned his hand from knocking to pushing. Cale didn't control his strength well. As soon as his hand landed on the door, the engraved door caved in. The force of his push sent an invisible shockwave in all directions. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening sound, the metal lock on the door was bent, and the parts of the door that were connected to the wall burst and fell off. The entire door was lifted open and flew into the room. In the luxuriously decorated room, expensive clothes such as men's suits and women's dresses were torn apart. Earthquake? What happened? On a big red bed, a man and a woman who were doing piston exercises naked were startled. By the time they reacted, Kyle had already arrived at the bedside. His eyes were extremely cold as he indifferently scanned the space in the room. The woman was stunned. She looked down at her body and screamed. Then she buried her head under the blanket. The man looked at Kale in panic. His lower body was limp. He was angry, but he didn't dare say anything. "Sir, is there anything I can help you with?" Kyle didn't respond. His divine power flowed and his field of influence formed a pressure that spread out like a wave. The man and woman on the bed didn't even last a second before they fainted. "Master, you're in the wrong room. This is not room 301. It's next door." Vice's voice reminded him. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Kale turned around. He didn't leave through the door. Instead, he kicked the wall of the room with his left foot. Amidst the rumbling of the explosion, the wall seemed to have been destroyed by a bomb, revealing a large gap that allowed a person to pass through. The room was instantly connected to room 301 next door. Dust and debris filled the air. A small figure was sitting on a chair in the lobby of room 301. He looked at Kyle and muttered to himself with an inexplicable emotion. "As expected. Just like what she said, you're a straightforward and impatient person. You haven't changed even after so many years. Who are you? Why do you have Paige's card? Why did you bring me here?" Kale's voice was cold. Looking at the mysterious man, he threw out the question without stopping. He didn't walk forward again, keeping a distance of 5 meters. He knew that it was impossible to get close to an ability user who was proficient in the profound meaning of space. "Until now, you still haven't thought of the answer? Or are you saying that you have thought of it, but you are still unwilling to admit the mistake you made?" The mysterious man's tone was extremely unpleasant, and it was hard to tell whether he was laughing or crying. Kale didn't say anything. Some speculations, perhaps as early as 60 years ago, had flashed through the subconscious mind, and then, along with the fragile humanity of ordinary people, were frozen and buried in that period of history. He had indeed become stronger, but he also appeared to be more ruthless. The height of evolution caused his bone marrow, blood, and even genes to reveal a unique nobility that was difficult to hide. He was incompatible with the ordinary people around him. But no matter what, Kale's soul was still human, a transmigrator from a distant parallel Earth. This essence wouldn't change even if thousands of years had passed. In room 301 and room 302, the dust finally settled. "What's your name?" Kale suddenly asked, baffled. The mysterious man was slightly stunned. He answered hesitantly, "You can call me Apostle. I like this hero title very much." Kale shook his head and insisted, "I'm asking for your real name." The mysterious man paused and said slowly, Lucci Carter." "Lucci, not a bad name." Kale nodded. He raised his left wrist and directly said to Vice in the form of an electronic watch, "Vice, add a name in the family Cal register file. Just call him Luke Carl." "Yes, master." Vice immediately obeyed the order. "You're really facing this scene?" Lucci shook her head helplessly and stood up from the chair. "All right, I should leave." As Lucci spoke, the night wind happened to blow in from the window. It brushed through the messy room, but it didn't blow up a single sleeve of his cloak. Under the slightly dim light, his small body was changing from solid to illusory. The shadow cast on the floor was no longer clear, as if he was about to evaporate into thin air in the room. "So that's how it is." Kale only took a glance and said thoughtfully, "You don't exist in this world or in this Marvel universe." "As expected of you." Lucci said with a smile, "That's right. Others are fine, but as soon as I get close to you, I'll be rejected by this world and exiled to another world. In our world, this is called the Savior Exclusion Rule. But it's still worth it to be able to see you." When Lucci said this, her legs had already disappeared. Only the illusory image of her upper body was left. It was like a 3D projection, unreal, projected on the wall. Kale had never been good at expressing his feelings. At this moment, he calmly said, "Is there something you want me to know?" "Of course." Lucci nodded. She looked straight at him and quickly said, "You don't have to worry about the spatial origin stone. It's always been by your side. You just haven't seen it yet." "I already know this." Kale nodded. The corner of his mouth curved into a subtle arc. "I'm afraid that a long time ago, when it was still a card, it was like an ability card. It gradually built a connection with my body and subtly changed my constitution and genes." He paused and then continued, "If I have descendants, they might be able to control the spatial origin stone's derivative ability." What was left of Lu Chi's upper body trembled slightly. She opened her mouth to speak but found that she was close to the return stage. Her voice could no longer be transmitted. She could only raise her hands and quickly express her meaning with sign language. "See you in the next dimension. I'll go and bring you back." Kale's words were very confident. He waved his hand in farewell. When the mysterious person was left with only a trace of her afterimage, he calmly narrated, "You just said that you made a mistake in the past. Maybe it's not a mistake. It's just that it's not obvious." Lu Chi's last trace of her afterimage disappeared. The feeling of blurred space quieted down. This sentence subtly echoed back and forth in the room where only Kale was left. Kale stood in the same place and did not move. After a long silence, Vice asked tentatively, "Master, just now, did you register the name I asked you to?" Kale asked. "It's registered." Vice quickly responded. "That's good. As for the other things, even I'm not too sure. I'll slowly figure it out in the future." Kale thought about it and did not stay any longer. He walked out of the room and left. Lu Chi was really gone. She had left this world, as he said. The world, in that sentence, did not refer to Earth, the Milky Way, the human countries, or the universe ruled by the divine dominion that was formed by the 9 realms. Instead, it was another parallel universe. "Where are we going?" Vice continued to ask. "Nowhere. We've seized control of the remaining 2 aircraft carriers. We'll leave the rest to Fry, Steve and Tawny. The farce between Hydra and SHLD can officially be declared over. From now on, there won't be any large organizations on Earth that can instigate a civil war." After Kyle concluded, he added meaningfully, "It's time for us to go home." Chapter 299. It was just as Kyle had said. When one of Hydra's helicopter carriers used for Project Insight was seriously damaged and fell into a lake on the outskirts of New York, the other 2 were taken over by the god of artificial intelligence after the Vice seized control of the satellites and moved to Family Cal's overseas base. In addition, most of Hydra's hidden bases around the world were destroyed by Family Cal and the newly established The Avengers. Only a few remnants continued to exist. Without decades of development, they would no longer have the ability to pose a threat to the peace of the Earth. HELD's forces suffered heavy losses in personnel and property after this turmoil, but after Kale's violent erasure and later Yutong's special ability to read minds, SHLD became a blessing in disguise and became a real world-class organization without spies. Fry Nick, former director of SHLD, announced his official comeback as the 3rd director of SHLD, after announcing the crime of Director Pierre. This Civil War farce, after Kale's intervention, can be said to be a great victory. Of course, there are also imperfections. For example, Captain America Steve, after fighting the Winter Soldier, returned alone from the outskirts of New York. His handsome and dirty face was full of frustration and helplessness. For example, Luna did not find Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch in the Hydra bases. It is suspected that they were urgently transferred to other places by the remnants of Hydra. Also, Kale, the symbol of peace, also returned alone to the Imperial Building in New York and did not go out later. The liquidation of Hydra was completely handed over to the family members and alliance members, and he did not take the initiative to intervene again. He seemed to have little interest in this. Even if it was a civil war that endangered the Earth, he did not take it too seriously. It was as if Kyle had casually walked out and slapped a buzzing and annoying fly to death. He then went home to take a nap, no matter how noisy the outside world was. Countless politicians and media wanted to see him, but they were all refused at the door. Hydra's turmoil and destruction. The civil strife on Earth caused by Hydra was only slightly calmed down after a month. HELD began to rebuild, and after the return of superheroes and the birth of hero organizations, the surface of the Earth once again returned to its original stability and peace. Half a year later. 2009, early autumn. United States, New York City. In the bright sunshine of the early morning, modern steel buildings stood in great numbers, the breeze blew gently and the temperature was just right. The streets and alleys gradually became noisy because of the activity of office workers. A black two-cylinder motorcycle slowly drove through the street. A black-haired young man wearing a leather jacket and jeans seemed to be very interested in everything in the city, his eyes constantly looking back and forth at everything around him. His name is Eddie Brock, a fresh graduate of college, but from today on he is a real certified reporter. Boss, please give me a cup of hot milk and a hot dog and burger. Parking the motorcycle on the side of the road, Eddie got off, waved his hand and shouted at the roadside breakfast stall. Okay, take the milk first, please wait a moment for the burger. The old stall owner grinned and poured a glass of milk and handed it over. Eddie took it and drank most of it in one gulp and exhaled comfortably. Cool. This unpretentious scene amused the stall owner. He roasted the hot dog and the burger and asked happily, "Young man, I don't think you are a local and I've never seen you before." "Yes. I just graduated from Columbia and am a reporter. After the internship, I applied to work at the head office in New York a few days ago. I flew here yesterday and I haven't reported to the company yet," Eddie said with a smile, his eyes looking gloomily at the city as he spoke. "I can see that you like New York City very much." The stall owner laughed and had a good impression of Eddie. "It's not that I like New York, it's that young people in the United States and all over the world like and look forward to New York, hoping to settle down here permanently." Eddie drank another mouthful of milk, wiped the residual stain on the corner of his mouth with his hand, and said with a little emotion, "New York, the city of economy, the city of tourism, the city of evolution, the city of peace, and the city of aliens." Eddie perfectly performed the occupational disease of a reporter. Once he started talking, he couldn't stop at all. "Especially the city of aliens, I like this name. You know, other countries or cities around the world are still debating the issue of aliens, but New York has already begun to communicate, deal with aliens, and even prepare for confrontation. Yesterday, I walked around the rented apartment building. Many places have signs for aliens. Even the public toilets, other than the ones for men, women, and the disabled, there are even public toilets for aliens. Also, there are some young people who are still in school. The mainstream topics of discussion are actually sports and fitness, about the development of human genes, evolution and strengthening, unnatural phenomena, mechatechnology, and ability mutations." Eddie couldn't help but laugh. He gestured with his hands and feet, getting more and more excited as he spoke. The stall owner also laughed and handed over the hamburger he made. He said with gratitude and respect, "Actually, there is also the stigma of the city of sin, but since half a year ago, the crime rate in this city has been decreasing day by day. As for tourism, evolution, peace, aliens, and other novel hot factors, it's all because of that one person." Eddie's eyes lit up slightly, and he naturally showed his admiration. He blurted out, "The symbol of peace, Mr. Kale?" The stall owner laughed and said half seriously and half jokingly, "Young man, you're new to New York and you're still in the reporter industry. Let me warn you, don't speak ill of Kyle here. Otherwise, even if the president comes, he won't be able to protect you. The locals of New York can drown you if they spit on you." "I'm not that stupid." Eddie took the hamburger and looked around. Even the passers-by on the street had the symbol of the devil card branded on their casual clothes. The symbol of peace, Kale. Perhaps because he was born in New York and had a family and power stationed in the center of New York City, the older generation of locals here from the end of World War II regarded him as their savior. His return made the legendary hero's light completely envelop the city, and within half a year, it became unbreakable. In other areas, the symbol of peace might be a big enough hero's reputation, but in New York, the symbol of peace was a living god of humanity. It was not an exaggeration to say that the local residents of New York were believers of the symbol of peace. Eddie finished his hamburger, drank his milk, and paid the bill. He said firmly, "My dream is to be able to do the first exclusive news interview with Mr. Kale one day. Then you'll have to work hard. I'm looking at you, young man." The stall owner smiled and encouraged him. Interview the symbol of peace? This should be one of the ultimate goals of the career of the world's reporters. Chapter 300. From Ancient Times to the Present. Some humans on Earth had already understood that in this vast universe, they were not alone. It was just that this universe with the 9 realms as its foundation was vast and boundless, like a huge forest with rich resources without borders. Under the long night, the races that lit up the light of civilization were like small hunters, living alone in each other's small circles. Only when one party made a gun and fired into the air could the other party vaguely detect the existence of the other party. In 965 AD, Norway on Earth was invaded by the frost giants from another layer of the world. The frost giants wanted to freeze Earth back to the Ice Age and transform it into their own territory in the human world. Later they were punished by the god King Odin and the army of the god realm under his command. The frost box was sealed in Odin's treasury, and the frost giants were defeated and retreated back to the world of the frost giants. Therefore, in the Norse legends there were records about the god realm, the Rainbow Bridge, Odin, Thor, and other extraterrestrial gods. During this period of thousands of years, there were beings from outer space who came to Earth under unknown circumstances and left again without exposing their identities. After thousands of years, the 21st century came, and humans finally began to have the technological capital to explore outer space. People who had no fear and respect, with great ambition, voluntarily pulled the trigger and fired the first shot into the dark forest of the universe. At this time, Earth in a dark and lonely outer space. Near the orbit of Earth, a huge fire was burning inside the cabin of a spaceship. Suspended in the intact area, the surviving female astronaut was holding a suitcase. Her young and beautiful face was full of horror, floating in the weightless tube and quickly swimming away. In the tightly closed suitcase, in several tempered glass storage containers, there was a lump of unknown liquid moving around, violently knocking on the inner wall of the glass as if it wanted to escape. Hiss. In the space cabin area covered by destructive flames, the figure of a terrifying humanoid monster was revealed. It was like a snowman gradually melting in the high temperature, making a sharp and unpleasant sound. "God, please protect me," the female astronaut kept muttering to herself. Finally, she looked at a family picture frame behind her, opened a space door in a corridor, dragged the suitcase and plunged into the space rescue capsule that was returning urgently. Half a minute later, one of the escape capsules left the space capsule that had completely collapsed and exploded, and directly below, it returned to the blue Earth with a faint halo. New York Emperor Tower. As an unnatural firm, the locals of New York were already used to it. However, there were still people from all over the world coming in every day. The phenomenon of famous buildings serving as New York's semi-tourist attractions did not decrease but instead increased. Of course, this was also a door that Kale had specially opened for Family Cal to connect with the world. Now it seemed that he had achieved his goal. Although entering and exiting the lobby on the first floor of the building required application and verification, there was still a large group of people blocking the inquiry window early in the morning and queuing up. Just as the hall was bustling with noise and excitement, two women suddenly entered the main entrance of the building side by side without being stopped by the guards. They walked through the hall and headed in the direction of the exclusive elevator. When everyone's eyes fell on them, they couldn't look away. Their eyes were wide open and they all held their breaths, causing the entire hall to become incomparably quiet in an instant. The two women were used to this. They were full of an unconcealable noble aura and a coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away. One of them had long black hair, a black dress and black boots. Above her towering breasts was a touch of snow-white collarbone. The white face of the Oriental beauty was delicate and flawless. She walked elegantly like a blooming black rose. The other person was wearing a shirt and a suit that leaned towards men. Her short dark green hair was draped over her shoulders, and her exquisite Western beauty's face was as cold as ice. Her every move was far more domineering and handsome than a man's. Her coldness made countless peeping eyes cower in fear. Any one of them could attract 100% of the passers-by's attention when walking on the street, not to mention that the two of them were walking side by side at this time. They were simply attractive to men, women, old and young. New York is so good. There are actually such superb beauties, and two of them appeared at the same time. Eddie, who was also sitting in the waiting chair in the hall, was stunned. His youthful hormones exploded and he swallowed his saliva madly. He wanted to take out the camera in his backpack to take a picture. He wanted to go to the company to report, but when he passed by the DeHow building, he couldn't help but come in to take a look. He didn't expect to encounter such a scene at this time. As soon as Eddie took out the camera, it was snatched away by the yellow-haired youth sitting next to him. "What are you doing?" Eddie looked at him discontentedly and lowered his voice subconsciously. "Brother, I'm saving you." The yellow-haired youth hid the camera under his coat, pointed to the guards with sunglasses standing in the corner and whispered, "Are you new? Don't you know the rules? No photography is allowed in the DeHow building. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences. And you not only want to use the camera but also want to take pictures of the two women. Aren't you harming people?" "It won't be good if the blood splashes on me." As the yellow-haired youth explained, his eyes reluctantly withdrew from the backs of the two women. Eddie also watched and asked with an itch in his heart, "Who are they?" "You're really new." The yellow-haired youth patted Eddie's shoulder and lowered his voice again, saying helplessly, "This is the woman of the owner of the building." Eddie's heart trembled and he said regretfully, "I see." Naturally, no man dared to touch the woman who symbolized peace. It seemed that she heard their conversation. Luna's face was dyed with a light pink color, and she entered the exclusive elevator with Yu Tong. "That guy, don't tell me he hasn't gotten up yet?" "He's not a guy, call him boss." "Yu Tong, you can't spoil him. He hasn't gone out much in the past 6 months. He doesn't study armor technology and doesn't care about the forces under him. He stays on the top floor all day to practice his divine power. If you dare to say these words in front of boss, then I have no objection." In the ascending elevator, Luna held Yu Tong's left arm and shook it gently, expressing her dissatisfaction. The two had a short conversation. After Yu Tong mentioned Kale, Luna's confidence was obviously not enough. She gritted her teeth and said angrily, "Of course I dare to say it." The exclusive elevator that required a high level of authority of the family went all the way to the top floor before stopping. After the elevator door opened, Luna let go of Yu Tong's arm and couldn't wait to step into the living room. "Boss, are you up? Do you want breakfast?" Luna said softly, like a good baby, without any of the complaining and domineering attitude from before. She wasn't afraid of anything, but she was afraid of boss. Only boss could teach her a lesson. Yu Tong laughed in her heart, and with a slight movement of her mind, an invisible force slowly swept through the space of the floor where they were. Yu Tong was slightly stunned and said, "Strange, boss isn't here." At the same time, Yu Tong's powerful mind went through the layers of walls and permeated the entire floor of the Dihao building. "How is it?" Luna asked anxiously. "No, boss left the Dihao building." Yu Tong frowned slightly. In the past 6 months, Kale basically didn't leave the Dihao building. The few times he went out, he would ask the two to accompany him in advance. Did something urgent happen? Yu Tong and Luna looked at each other with a touch of worry in their eyes. Something that required Kale to do personally. Was this the end of the world? Chapter 301. Beep beep. The communicator on her body suddenly rang, and Yu Tong quickly took out the communicator to connect under Luna's anxious gaze. The faint blue light unfolded into a clear projection, projecting a small robot in the air. It grinned and said, "Good morning, ladies." "Good morning, my ass. Where is boss? Are you with him? If you don't hurry up and say it, I'll dismantle all your parts next time." Luna raised her cold and heroic eyebrows slightly. Vice coughed. Its original body was iron and vibranium metal, and Luna, who had the ability to control magnetic fields, happened to be its nemesis. It didn't dare to hide anything and said with a slightly helpless mechanical face, "I am indeed with Master, but we have already left New York." Yu Tong's lips opened slightly and said, "Boss went out so suddenly, and even the message was conveyed by you. What urgent matter happened?" Vice replied, "I don't know the specific reason. Master decided to go out in the morning and Venom and I were a little surprised." "Where are you?" "I'll go there now." Luna was eager to move. She wanted Kale to go out before, but Kale ignored her. Now that Kale took the initiative to go out, she naturally didn't want to let go of this opportunity. "We have arrived at the destination, Mexico." Vice said in a deep voice, "Master asked me to inform you that you don't need to make a special trip here. Stay in New York City for the next 2 days, maybe something will happen." "That's boring." Luna crossed her arms and snorted discontentedly. "Something? Wasn't the Hydra organization taken care of half a year ago?" Yu Tong was thoughtful and understood the key points in Vice's message. "This time, I'm afraid it didn't originate from within the earth." Vice's tone was serious, and he pointed to the top of his head with his mechanical finger, which should be pointing to an unobstructed blue sky. Yu Tong's beautiful eyes widened and whispered to herself, "The enemies that boss mentioned before, are they finally coming?" "Just in time. It just so happens that I'm very bored. In this half a year, the proficiency of my ability has improved greatly." Luna licked her lips excitedly. Vice's microchip felt a chill run down his spine as he observed a 3-second moment of silence for the invaders. The creatures outside the universe probably didn't know how dangerous Earth was right now. On the other side, North America, Mexico, near Old Bridgetown. Under the scorching sun, the area within a radius of a few kilometers was nothing but a barren desert with no weeds. Whenever the wind blew, it would stir up a disgusting cloud of dust. In this area there were only a few small towns and villages, let alone big and small cities. The buildings in the small towns were simple and modern, as if a cowboy would come out on a horse at any time. A bus-like travel vehicle was parked at the entrance of the town. There were all kinds of camping equipment, detection equipment, clothes, food, and so on. Two young girls in fashionable jeans and casual leather jackets were sitting in the driver's seat and the passenger's seat respectively. They looked to be in their early 20s and had just graduated from university. The girl in the driver's seat had a cute and beautiful face, but she always maintained a serious and old-fashioned look. She was seriously fiddling with the equipment and checking some detection data recorded in her notebook. The girl in the front passenger seat was wearing a pair of red glasses. Her precocious and extremely charming face was filled with a relaxed expression. She had a lollipop in her mouth and her feet were resting on the steering wheel in boredom. The two of them would be rare beauties even if they were in a big city with a lot of people. However, at this moment they were a little spoiled and were huddled in the car like workaholics. "Dear Jane, will your mentor really come?" The girl in glasses looked at the endless wilderness outside the window and asked in boredom. "Daisy, this is the 8th time I've answered you." The girl called Jane looked up helplessly and put down the notebook in her hand. She said with certainty, "After I sent the detection data to my mentor last night, he said that he's willing to help. He said that he'll come to this town before tonight and go to the wilderness with us for a second detection." "Then let's wait a little longer." Daisy pushed her glasses and said with a sigh, "You're the one who needs to do astronomical research. I'm an economics major, I should be lying in the hotel and enjoying the sauna. Why do I have to come to this godforsaken place to eat dirt with you?" Jane comforted her, "I'll treat you to a big meal when we get back. Hold on for a few more days. Maybe we'll get the ideal data tonight and we can return tomorrow or the day after." "I hope so," Daisy said and suddenly heard the sound of a car engine. She couldn't help but poke her head out of the window with a cap on. She saw an old Ford coming to the town gate, kicking up dust along the way. "Jane, is that your mentor?" Daisy asked. "Maybe. Let's get out and see." Jane called out to Daisy and the two got out of the caravan. When they came to the front of the car, the Ford stopped right next to them. "Little Foster, you really know how to order people around." The door opened and a middle-aged old man with white hair combed back and simple dark-style clothes walked out of the driver's seat with a smile. "Mentor, thank you so much for being able to come." Jane smiled and quickly greeted him. She pointed to Daisy behind her and said, "This is my good friend Daisy." "Hello, Professor." Daisy held the lollipop in her mouth and bowed politely. "This is my university mentor, Professor Eric Selvig." Jane introduced the middle-aged old man to Daisy. "Hello, Daisy. Just call me Eric. Don't call me Professor." Eric was very approachable. His wrinkled face was cool and youthful. Jane said quickly, "Since we're all here, let's go to the town first. After we finish dinner, we can get ready to go to the survey site." Eric waved his hand and said, "Jane, don't be anxious. Don't worry, I have a guest in my car." "Guest?" Jane and Daisy were stunned. "Yes." Eric nodded and turned back to the side of the Ford. He asked the slightly rolled-down window of the back seat, "Mr. Card, is it convenient for you to get off? I'll introduce you to the two students on this trip." The person in the car didn't respond, but after a while, the door abruptly opened. A tall young man with silver hair mixed with red hair. He wore a pair of slightly large sunglasses and a black windbreaker that wrapped up to his calves. He stepped out of the car in boots. "Wasn't this Cale?" "This is a friend of mine. He's the person in charge of a high-tech company." "Ian." Eric paused and almost spilled the beans. He smiled awkwardly and continued, "He and I met at a scientific conference. He saw the data you sent yesterday and was interested, so he wanted to come and take a look." Cale glanced at the two girls through his sunglasses and said faintly, "You can call me Card. I hope you have a pleasant trip." Chapter 302. Inside Old Bridgetown. The sun was setting in the west. The red glow of the sunset still had a place in the dark blue night sky. The curtain of night had quietly shrouded this western town located in the wilderness of the outskirts. The locals who had worked for the day had returned one after another. Warm lights were switched on in every household. Some down-to-earth bars and restaurants were gradually becoming more popular. Many people gathered in twos and threes to eat meat and drink wine. In a bar-cum-restaurant, Cale and the others gathered around a square table near the window. The men sat on one side and the women on the other. There were large glasses of beer and small plates of peanuts on the table. In the beginning, both Jane and Daisy were suspicious of Cale's identity. However, since the intermediary was Professor Eric, and after checking his personal information on the internet and finding that it matched, they finally agreed that Cale was a fellow visitor. The dishes haven't been served yet." I'll go to the bathroom first. Jane, please entertain Mr. Card for me with your friend, Eric instructed before hurriedly leaving his seat and walking to the bathroom outside the bar counter. In fact, he had been itching to go to the bathroom for a long time. However, it did not seem good to let this person stay with the two students. Now he finally could not help himself. After Eric walked away, Daisy pouted her delicate lips and muttered in a weak voice that only she and Jane could hear, "I also want someone to entertain me when I come to this damn place." Jane inadvertently glanced at her friend and hinted with her right elbow to poke her body. Daisy let out an ouch, and began to eat peanuts sullenly. So good to be young, Cale thought to himself. He pursed his lips lightly and took a sip of the foamy beer from his beer glass. This scene surprised Jane. She said in surprise, "Mr. Card, you're drinking beer? I thought you were a member of the upper class. There's no difference between drinking red wine that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and beer that costs dozens of dollars. It's just that drinking the more expensive one can raise one's status and social status." Cale's face was elegant and gentle. The corner of his mouth curved into a gentle smile. After meeting the mysterious man in the Tacunio Club, he seemed to have completely integrated into the human society on Earth in the past 6 months. He was no longer as cold and rational as the Taishang Wang Qing. From his flesh and blood to his genes, to his soul to his temperament, the noble aura that was incompatible with ordinary people, and the pressure of an expert were all dormant. Now, from the outside to the inside, Cale was just an ordinary earthling. This was the Card control that had achieved self-perfection. Not only had his temperament returned to normal, even his fire divine power had made great progress. The red hair in the middle of his silver bangs was proof of this. Cale was not arrogant. He immediately closed the distance between the people at the table. Daisy took a sip of beer and said casually, "Hey, you're Carl, right? It's already so late. Why do you insist on wearing sunglasses?" Jane stared at Cale across the table. She was also suspicious. If he was a researcher who was used to observing the stars in the night sky, he would never wear sunglasses at night. "I forgot. Okay, I'll take it off." Cale nodded. After putting down the beer glass, he took the initiative to reach out and take off his sunglasses. The sunglasses were placed under the table and immediately attached to his left wrist. It quickly and mechanically transformed, silently merging with the original electronic watch. You are..." Daisy stared straight at Cale's face. Just when Cale thought that she had recognized him, Daisy took a deep breath and exclaimed, "You are too young and handsome." Cale was speechless. "You are indeed handsome, but why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere before?" Jane said blankly, "A lot of people say so." Cale smiled and started the topic humorously. He suddenly remembered. Fortunately, before leaving New York, in order to avoid being recognized by others, he made slight adjustments to his appearance with Venom. Strangers would not recognize his original identity at first glance. In addition, in the past 6 months, Cale had become 1 or 2 years younger, returning to the age of 20. Even the members of the Avengers found it hard to believe. The others either remained the same or grew older with each passing day. Only Kyle remained youthful, and at the same time he was healthy and energetic. "So young, I think I can call you little brother. I will protect you." Daisy smiled charmingly and gave Cale a naive look. Just after returning from the toilet, Eric happened to hear Daisy's words. He was so shocked that he almost fell. He held onto the table and chair to stop himself from falling. Jane quickly got up and stepped forward to support Eric. She asked, "Mentor, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Eric waved his hand and sat back in the chair. He looked at Daisy, cleared his throat and solemnly said, "Mr. Card is my friend. What do you mean by little brother?" "I'm just kidding." Daisy was angry, but her eyes looking at Cale became more and more enthusiastic. Jane secretly pinched Daisy a few times and gave up after failing to do so. To be honest, even she, a scientific researcher, would believe in love at first sight if she had not experienced her first love. After all, the young man named Card in front of her, although there were still many mysteries that had not been exposed, was already impeccable. He looked gentle and kind and gave people a sense of security. Coupled with his perfect figure and appearance as well as his superior and wealthy identity, he was simply a prince in a fairy tale movie. But because he was too perfect, so perfect that it was unreal, Jane had a trace of doubt in her heart. Also, her mentor's attitude towards Card was polite and respectful with an unconcealable awe. After the hot barbecue was on the table, they stopped talking and began to wipe out the food on the table to prepare for the field exploration in the second half of the night. Cale blended into this small circle and played the small role he designed. His deep eyes looked out of the window from time to the bright night sky. If it was to deal with the enemy, he would not have bothered to go through the trouble of disguising his identity and specially establish a friendly relationship with 3 ordinary people. It was only because this time, it was a guest who came to Earth. To be more precise, it was a special friend. Odin, that old man, why did he have to make me do this job? Kale thought helplessly and quickly finished his meat without losing his grace. After the group finished eating, they got on the station wagon together. Jane drove the car away from the town and set off for the dark wilderness. Late at night, the night sky was dotted with stars and night fell on the earth. 2 bright lampposts shone through the dark fog. The roar of the car's engine could be heard as it sped through the barren desert. Kale sat in the front passenger seat with his eyes closed, while Daisy and Eric were in the rear compartment. Both of them were holding survey instruments and reporting the situation in real time. The radiation value is greatly increasing, obviously several times stronger than yesterday. We are approaching that area. The direction is right. Then sit tight. Jane reminded and slammed on the accelerator, increasing the station wagon's speed by a notch. No one noticed that in the night sky directly facing the station wagon, the black clouds were broken, and the stars were spinning into a cluster, glowing with circles of wonderful colorful halos. Kale suddenly opened his eyes and said to himself inexplicably, "It's about time. Earth welcomes you." Chapter 303. 10 miles outside of Old Bridge Town. In the sky above the desert, the stars formed a nebula that looked like an aurora. During this period of time, the colorful lights flowed as if something was about to fall from it. The van suddenly came to a stop. The wheels scraped out 2 tracks and raised a cloud of dust before it came to a stop directly below the center of the colorful nebula. "It's here. Hurry up and record the data for me." Jane stepped on the brakes and picked up the notebook placed beside her. She decisively ordered her friend Daisy and mentor Eric in the back of the van. Kale was secretly shocked. This girl looked quite cute, but he didn't expect her to be as strong and direct as a workaholic when it came to work. However, his mind wasn't on the few people in the van. Instead, he was keenly aware of the surrounding turbulence in the air and the disturbed space. As far as Kale knew, there were only 2 things that could cause this kind of spatial disorientation when several layers of worlds were connected together. The first was the activation of the dimensional stone. The second was the activation of the Rainbow Bridge. Kale lowered his eyelids and looked at the 3 people who were busy in the van. He shrugged and reminded, "Be careful. Maybe something will fall." "What could it be?" Daisy muttered and looked up at the skylight of the van. Her eyes were wide open and her mouth was so wide that even the lollipop in her mouth fell out. In the middle of the nebula, something like a meteorite fell from it. The friction with the atmosphere turned into a large fireball, quickly dispersing the darkness of the night sky. "Oh my God." Before Daisy could react, the experienced Eric had already slammed the seat and shouted, "Jane! Hurry up and drive. Get out of here." "Got it." Jane was one of the calmest people in the van other than Kale. She put down the notebook and immediately shifted gears. Stepping on the accelerator, the van rushed out between the roar of the engine and the roar of the wheels. As soon as the van left the spot, the blazing meteorite fell with great force on the desert surface 10 meters behind the van. Boom. Like a bomb exploding with gunpowder, countless gravel and dust splashed in all directions. The sweeping wave of dust pushed the station wagon forward. After surviving the disaster, Daisy patted her heaving chest. "Jane, I'm never going out with you again. A meteorite just happened to fall. This is the first time I've encountered such a coincidence," Eric said with a lingering fear. "Fortunately, they're all fine." Jane breathed a sigh of relief and operated the driving instrument. She even turned around to confirm the situation in the back seat. Kale's face was calm as he reclined on the seat, as if the scene just now was not dangerous at all. He reminded him in a low voice, "Drive carefully." The reminder came a little too late. Jane had just looked at the windshield when the front of the station wagon hit something, making a loud and dull sound. Jane stepped on the emergency brake subconsciously and stopped the car completely. Under the bright car lights, she could vaguely see a man in black lying on the ground in front of her. She said in shock, I think I bumped into someone." No, to be more precise, it was a god. "You're driving and you've bumped into a god." Kale secretly held his forehead but didn't say anything. Only Vice and Venom were happily communicating with each other using some kind of unique sound wave. "Ah, Thor, you also have a day like this." "That's right, in this open Bifrost, the one who fell was Thor himself. 3 days ago, Kale received the gatekeeper's order to prepare to return to the divine realm through the Bifrost. As the guardian of the divine realm, he would observe the succession ceremony of Thor, the son of Odin, Thor as the divine realm's guardian. As a result, this morning the succession ceremony was cancelled, and he was temporarily replaced as the master to secretly take care of Thor's mortal training. As for why Thor came to Earth in such a sorry way, even if Kale didn't get the gatekeeper's order in advance, he could guess that the incident in the divine realm was inevitable. Thor had already held the hammer of Thor, a symbol of power. He was the successor of the divine king that Odin had decided. As the god of trickery, Loki was naturally unhappy. This time, seeing that the succession ceremony was imminent, he finally couldn't help but play a little trick. Well, to put it simply, it was a large-scale family farce caused by two brothers competing for the father's favor. Jane and the other two had already gotten out of the car and surrounded the black-clothed man, anxiously checking his physical condition. Kale sat steadily in the co-pilot seat, his heart unperturbed. He cast a slightly sympathetic gaze to the front. He could sense that Thor's divine power was now sealed. This was Odin's method. Please don't die, don't die. Jane knelt on the ground and kept pushing Thor's body with her hands. Under the stimulation of his muscles, Thor's eyes suddenly widened. His shoulder-length blonde hair was scattered, and he reflexively straightened his back and roared at the sky. This scene scared Jane and Eric. They reached out to stop him, but even if they had lost their divine power, Thor's strength was still not something they could resist. Seeing that Thor was about to break free, Daisy exclaimed and took out something from her jacket pocket. She turned on the switch and stabbed it forward into Thor's strong body. A faint blue electric current poured into Thor's body. He twitched slightly, then rolled his eyes and fell to the ground. Thor was stunned by the electric shock. There seemed to be nothing wrong with that. Vice, did you take a picture? Kale in the car snapped his fingers. Dark history. This was definitely the dark history of the future king of gods. Of course, I also copied and saved it. Vice let out a gentlemanly chuckle. Give me a copy. Venom said as if he wanted to share something good. The night was long. Thor was not the only guest from outer space tonight. At this time, on the outskirts of New York, a corner of the night sky was illuminated red. A rescue capsule shuttled through the atmosphere. The painted shell was wrapped in flames. It fell into the forest like a meteorite, raising dust and sizzling smoke. After a while, a row of motorcade marked with the logo of the biogenetics company surrounded the rescue capsule. The personnel equipped with firearms and wearing protective clothing quickly got out of the vehicle. They opened the rescue capsule with tools and transferred the unconscious female astronaut in the capsule and all objects to a large vehicle. When it was the silver suitcase's turn, several researchers were excited. They carefully took out the suitcase and placed it on a specific delivery vehicle. After the rescue capsule was transferred to a large transport vehicle, the motorcade started in a row and slowly returned to the direction of downtown New York. No one noticed. In the middle of the vehicle, at this time in the silver suitcase, there were 4 glass tanks containing mysterious liquid creatures. One of them was full of cracks, smelly air, and the smell of the same kind. Chapter 304. Old Bridgetown, Emergency Room 3 on the second floor of a large hospital. It was late at night. Initially there were not many patients. However, when Kale and the rest arrived, almost all the doctors and nurses in the hospital gathered here. Father Heimdall. Open the Bifrost and let me go back. What is this place? Damn it, how dare you attack the son of Odin? It was as if a war was going on in the emergency room. A tall and strong blond man wearing only a black shirt and pants was lying on the white hospital bed with his arms and legs spread out. He was shouting inexplicable words in agitation. There were more than 5 doctors and nurses in total. They could not stop him and were almost thrown to the floor. Call the guards. Call the guards. The doctors had never seen such a strong patient. They screamed in horror. A few guards who heard the screams ran down the corridor and entered the emergency room to help stop the fight. Outside the emergency room, Kale and the rest were waiting on the chairs in the corridor. Through the transparent glass window they could see Thor screaming like a madman. The doctors, nurses and guards swarmed forward and surrounded him to restrict his movements. Thor was forced to lean against the door. His rugged face was distorted. He tried to preserve his last bit of dignity and growled, "You're just mortals. You can't defeat the mighty Thor." Before he could finish, the attending doctor injected him with a sedative. Thor's eyes rolled back and he lost the strength to fight back. His body was dizzy and he slid to the ground. Outside the door, the crowd who was watching the turn of events fell into a short silence. Do you think Jane knocked him silly? Daisy shrunk her neck and asked weakly. It's not like he hit his head. Even if he's silly, he must have been electrocuted by you, Jane retorted. Her beautiful eyes were filled with worry. Didn't you hear what he said just now? Odin bifrost Thor. Eric reminded them softly. Seeing the two students' confused expressions, he explained bitterly, that's something from Norse mythology. I grew up listening to these myths. So, the three of them looked at each other and then looked at Kale, who had been silent all this time. Why are you looking at me? Kyle chuckled and shrugged. Roaming the wastelands alone at night, shouting about the God King, the divine realm, and whatnot. I think it's some kind of Chinibu disease that's become popular recently. Chinibu? Everyone was stunned. They had also heard of this new term before. Now, it seemed to match the characteristics of the mysterious man's delusions. Yes, it's a serious case of Chinibu, Kale said. Secretly, Vice and Venom were laughing so hard that they almost couldn't maintain their disguise. Everyone wanted to continue the discussion, but Kale got up from the chair and walked towards the stairs. He waved his hand and said, well, that's it for tonight. I'll find a place to catch up on my sleep. Tomorrow morning, we'll discuss the survey data from last night. Thank you for your hard work. You can call me anytime tomorrow. Eric responded quickly and respectfully. He also walked Kale half a corridor. After Kale's figure disappeared at the stairs on the second floor of the hospital, Eric returned with a sigh. Only then did he notice that Jane and Daisy were staring at him suspiciously. Well, I'm going to rest too. Eric's heart thumped as he scratched his head and said, wait. Jane and Daisy, one on the left and one on the right, stepped forward and pulled Eric back to his original seat. Jane cleared her throat and asked in a deep voice, Mentor, that Mr. Card, what is his identity? Eric said with a wry smile, didn't I introduce him already? He's a friend of mine, the head of a research company. Were you kidding? Just a company head. How can a well-known astronomer and university professor be so timid? Daisy snorted coldly. Eric blinked innocently and said helplessly, is it obvious? Jane and Daisy nodded at the same time and said in unison, it's obvious. Okay. Eric thought for a while and said straightforwardly, you don't have to ask me about Mr. Card's identity. When he wants you to know, you will naturally know. If he doesn't want you to know, even if you give me 10 times the courage, I wouldn't dare to reveal it easily. I won't ask again. Jane nodded thoughtfully. Daisy said suspiciously, so exaggerated. Could he be the mayor of New Mexico? Hearing this sentence, Eric's slightly aged face remained serious and serious. He said faintly, there's no comparison, it's far worse. If you use the President of the United States as an analogy, it's more like it. Jane and Daisy looked at each other, both of their eyes full of horror. Compared to the President of the United States? Was this identity so big that it could reach the sky? Looking at the shocked expressions of the two students, Eric bickered, but there was one sentence that he didn't add in the end. The President, from a certain point of view, seems incomparable. It was almost dawn at night. The sky in the east was turning white. The morning light shone on the desert outside the town, and the darkness disappeared like the tide. In the wilderness where Jane and the others were hit by a meteorite last night, a pit with a radius of 10 meters sunk into the ground. There was no meteorite or alien spacecraft wreckage in the center, only a small silver hammer standing on top of it. Whoosh! The shadow fell close to the ground, and the strong wind blew the sand and stones into the air. Kyle retracted his dark wings and stood calmly in the inner circle of the pit. He looked at the simple hammer with his golden eyes. The watch on his left wrist projected a blue light, scanning the hammer and the surrounding ground inch by inch. Vice said emotionally, with the current technology and databases, it's impossible to analyze. Master, is this Thor's hammer? Of course it's the real deal. Kale nodded and said, according to Odin, whoever can hold this hammer and deserves it will have the power of Thor and be crowned the king of the divine realm. With that, he bent down slightly, stretched out his right hand, and firmly grasped the handle of the hammer with his palm. Master, you. Vice's words stopped, but Kale, who was channeling his divine power, easily picked up Thor's hammer and weighed it in his hand. You really picked it up? Master, won't you be the king of the divine realm then? Venom said incredulously. You two are thinking too much, it's not that simple. Kale shook his head and smiled, holding the hammer, and said without the slightest arrogance, it's not just Thor and me, there will be more people who can lift this hammer in the future. In fact, as long as you have the ability of divine power, a pure heart without any distracting thoughts and no strong selfish desire for power, you will be qualified to lift Thor's hammer. But what Odin, the king of the gods, said. Weiss raised a point that he still did not understand. You believe that old man Odin's words? Kale tried to swing the hammer and said, think about it, who did Odin say those words to? It was the two princes who were still young at the time, Thor and Loki. In other words, only one of them can lift the hammer to fulfill the condition of being crowned king. As for Thor and Loki, Odin already knew who among them can lift Thor's hammer. This Thor's hammer is just a pretense and a test. At this point, Kale sighed slightly, and put Thor's hammer back to its original position without hesitation. The hammer is good, but it doesn't suit me. It seems that a divine weapon that is truly suitable for me still needs to be slowly gathered and forged. Chapter 305. The hammer with one hand touched the desert ground, stirring up a small cloud of dust. It stood upright on the spot and returned to its original simple and ordinary appearance after the divine power was stripped away. You left the hammer here? Weiss felt a little regretful. After all, this was Thor's hammer. It was a perfect attack and support type divine weapon. What else? Bring it home? Not to mention Saul, who knows if Odin will come knocking on our door because of this. This is a hot potato. Kyle was not regretful at all. He had seen through the situation very clearly. Thor's hammer. This was a beginner-level divine weapon that Odin had specially made for Thor after he was born. It was a transitional weapon for him to grow from a child to a god king. If others wanted to take it for themselves, they would have to ask for Thor's permission first. Even if Thor agreed, Odin would not let the hammer that symbolized the power of the divine territory's king fall into the hands of others so easily. Moreover, this hammer was specially made for Thor's lightning divine power. Kale, the god of fire, had no reason to fall out with Odin over this beginner-level divine weapon. It's an eternal divine weapon. The materials are hard to find, but I can still use the eternal fire for now. Kale turned around. Seeing that the sun was already out, he spread his dark wings and prepared to return to town. However, Weiss suddenly called, Master, there's a call. There's a call for you from home. Oh. Kale did not think too much and nodded to answer the call. With a beep, Weiss' transformed watch projected a model of the upper body of a beauty. The oriental-style face was exquisite and perfect. Even her long black hair was delicate and flawless. Boss, it's time to say good morning on your side. Yu Tong also saw Kale's projection and greeted with a smile. What's the matter? Tell me. Kale looked at Yu Tong's projection and asked. Yu Tong didn't procrastinate and narrated, just a few hours ago, an ordinary person came to the office and claimed that he was in the outskirts of New York and witnessed the scene of a meteorite falling at night. He also took a video with a certain clarity value. I sent a technician to the scene to investigate and found obvious traces similar to the landing of an escape capsule. There were also tire tracks of different types of vehicles receiving escape capsules. Interestingly, I asked Natasha. With HELD's resources, she could not find out which country's escape capsule was from. Since it could not be found on the surface, it meant that the escape capsule was from outer space, or it was a private product of non-country. Kyle understood. He snapped his fingers and said, Go on. Weiss and Venom, on the other hand, were very interested in such matters and listened quietly. If it was any other area, I'm afraid it would take some time to find, but the fleet that received the escape capsule came from New York. Yu Tong said with a smile on her thin eyebrows. Even Kale could not help but shake his head. New York? Don't you know whose territory New York is now? Family Cal SHELD, and Stark Industries. When the three of them were closely intertwined, Family Cal was a living tyrant in New York, whether it was on the surface or in the dark. Yu Tong did not look at the files. With her super memory, she said with great familiarity, So, I quickly found out the origin of the escape capsule and the fleet. It came from a large private company called the Life Foundation in Queens, New York. The boss is Carlton Drake. Half a year ago, he invested tens of billions of dollars in a joint venture to build aviation equipment. He's passionate about genetic mutations caused by cosmic radiation. Kale touched his chin and narrowed his eyes. It's just a private company without any special background. Since you've found out the origin, you should have already taken action and obtained some inside information, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have specially informed me. Of course. Yu Tong raised her smooth chin like a little girl who was encouraged. She waved her hand gently and said, This is an internal confidential video that I sent K2 to sneak into the Life Foundation and intercepted from the internal archives. The 3D projection was transferred. Kale began to receive the video and play it. In the video, the camera was facing a completely enclosed research room with tempered glass and a floor. There were all kinds of equipment and instruments inside. A tramp in ragged clothes was locked inside. Outside the room, there were many staff members in suits or protective clothing. "What do you want to do to me? Get me out of here." The tramp's face was furious. He looked at the people who were surrounding him as a test subject and banged his hands on the glass door. "Let's begin." Outside the room, a middle-aged man in a suit said decisively. A female staff member raised her hand and voiced her opinion in a low voice. "Boss, I'm sorry. Boss, those symbiotic demons should be studied separately. We shouldn't conduct human experiments now. Only through human experiments can we communicate with them faster. If you don't want to do it, you can quit." The man who was called boss retorted coldly. Then he continued, "Hurry up and start." "Yes." The rest of the staff members answered. They all got into position and operated the computer to turn on the switch. In the research room, a storage device slowly turned on after a slight sound and a cloud of white smoke. "Oh my God, what the hell is that?" The tramp felt a chill run down his spine. He turned around and happened to see a ball of dark gray liquid flowing out of the storage device as if it had life and consciousness. It slid across the floor and approached his body. Puff. The tramp was still screaming in horror. The dark gray liquid crawled along his feet to his chest and finally seeped into his clothes and disappeared into his body. "Look, it worked." The boss waved his fist excitedly. However, he was only happy for a few seconds. The tramp in the research room suddenly fell to the ground. He curled up into a ball and twitched in pain. In 3 seconds he stopped struggling and turned into a corpse. After a while, the mouth of the tramp's corpse opened. The dark gray liquid gushed out and slammed against the glass door angrily. It failed. The boss's smile froze on his face. He sighed and said in a dignified voice, "Continue the human experiments. Also, other than the one we have, find the 3 symbiotic demons that escaped during the transportation process." The video ended there. Yutong's projection was restored. Seeing Kale's serious expression, she asked, "Boss, do you know those symbiotic demons?" "It's not that simple." When Kale said this, Venom's body became restless. "Same kind?" Venom muttered to himself. Kale frowned and said, "It was just a casual reminder from the gatekeeper, Heimdall, that something from outer space was coming to Earth. I didn't expect it to be this kind of alien." Symbiotic demons. In addition to Venom, which was derived from the card drawing system, and Carnage, which was split from Venom, there were more than 4 of them. Moreover, 3 of them were out of control somewhere in the New York area. It would be troublesome to leave these creatures alone. Chapter 306. Yutong hadn't seen the family head's face so serious even during the Civil War incident last time. It was obvious that the enemy they were dealing with this time wasn't an ordinary small fry. "Boss, what should we do?" Yutong asked and handed the decision-making power back to Kale. "Let me think about it. I have something to do here as well. I have to stay in New Mexico for a few days." Kale pondered and suddenly thought of something. He asked Venom telepathically, "Venom, if it were you, what would you do first when you arrived in an unfamiliar alien area?" "Adapt." Venom responded without hesitation and explained, "We symbiotic creatures can only survive in the true sense by attaching ourselves to other creatures. So when we come to an unfamiliar area, the first thing we will do is to find a suitable native life form for symbiosis and adapt to the local life." Then what?" Kale asked. Venom's voice was slightly cold and hoarse as he said, "Symbiotic creatures have a certain degree of territorial awareness and will leave a unique scent in the area where they are active. If the local area has long been occupied by other symbiotic creatures of the same kind, the foreign symbiotic creatures that adapt to the local environment will come to challenge them. Then the foreign symbiotic creatures should be lucky. There is a symbiotic king who just happened to leave New York." Kale smiled faintly and thought for a while before instructing Yutong, "Those symbiotic creatures have just arrived in New York. They will probably endure for a while and look for suitable strong humans to attach themselves to. During this time, family Cal members are strictly prohibited from going out alone. Spread out in teams of 3 throughout the city to secretly observe. After discovering symbiotic creatures, don't rashly engage in battle. I'll leave it to you and Luna or inform the Avengers to deal with it. As for the biological genetic association, Inform Fry first and let us, D. Put pressure on them to investigate. We can't let everything be solved by our family. Kale said and finally reminded, by the way, don't let those symbiotic creatures get close to you. Otherwise it will be difficult to deal with them. Okay, I got it. Yu Tong nodded solemnly. This was the family cow's first time dealing with an alien creature. This was also the first time that Earth had tried to deal with an alien invasion with its own forces and power without relying on the divine dominion. This is just the beginning. There will be more in the future on a larger scale. Let's just treat this as a test. After Kale said softly, he hung up the phone and flapped his dark wings in the air behind him. After stirring up a strong sandstorm, Kale soared into the air from his original spot. Along with circles of white waves bursting forth, he broke through the sound barrier like a black flowing light and left the wilderness desert. Kale had just left. An old car drove past the crater and stopped at the edge of the crater. A middle-aged local opened the door, got out of the car and walked forward. He looked at the huge crater below with a blank expression, as well as the silver hammer in the middle of it. At this moment in downtown New York, Emperor Tower. After Yu Tong gave the order, the unnatural firm announced a temporary suspension of business. The time of resumption was not set. They only explained to the public that it was due to internal reasons. Cadis in the New York area formed teams of 3 and maintained a 24-hour audio connection with the headquarters. They began to search for traces of the alien symbiotic entity. On the other side, in a shabby rental apartment building near downtown Brooklyn. Sure enough, all companies are the same. They don't treat newcomers as humans. After being ordered around by his boss and colleagues for an entire day, reporter Eddie dragged his sore and tired body upstairs. The shabby and cheap monthly rental apartment naturally did not have a high-end item like an elevator. He could only climb up the stairs tiredly. Straight up to the 5th floor, Eddie walked through a corridor with many doors. When he was about to reach the room he rented, he saw a bald man standing in front of the door of the room directly opposite his house. He was holding a black plastic bag that kept swinging in his hand. "Hey neighbor." Eddie wiped his sweat and waved his hand in a friendly manner. The bald man heard him and looked to the side. His dark eyes were filled with indifference and coldness. He stared at Eddie with vigilance and coldness. Eddie retracted his arm and scratched the back of his head. He said awkwardly, "Sorry to disturb you." Eddie hurried to the door of his room and nervously took out the key from his pocket. He could feel the bald man's gaze on his back. He pushed the door open and only opened a gap that allowed one person to pass through. He quickly went in, slammed the door firmly and locked it. After completing a series of steps, Eddie leaned his back against the door and complained helplessly, "Terrible neighbor. Strange neighbor." Outside the door, the bald man also spat. He slowly took out the key, opened the door of his house and stepped in. There was nothing in the room except for a simple bed and chair. The black curtains were tightly drawn. After the only source of light was the door closed, the space inside the room was completely dark. The bald man sat on the chair and took out a lively sea fish from his bag. He opened his mouth and bit off a piece of raw fish. He ate it in big bites. The bald man fell into deep thought as he ate. He was Toxin. His birthplace was on planet Saka, which was several galaxies away from Earth. He was guided by something in the dark to find the meaning of his existence and came to Earth. Of course, Toxin came to Earth half a year ago. He lived in an indigenous village in Africa for 2 to 3 months. He stayed in Asia for a few months. He moved to Europe for another few months. During that time, he changed 5 human hosts and became familiar with and integrated into the human society on Earth. Finally, he followed a clue and came to New York in the United States. When he came to New York, Toxin sensed the presence of his only kin. He thought that he could quickly solve some of the mysteries on his body. Who would have thought that the sudden alien invasion would mess up the key presence of several symbiotic demons in New York? Now, the presence of symbiotic demons from different regions gathered in New York. They attracted and repelled each other. It was difficult to tell them apart. I can only find them one by one and eliminate them. I hope you have the information I need. Toxin was expressionless as he finished the fish in his hand. The distance between planet Saka and Earth and the decades of space wandering could not stop him. There was no reason for him to stop at his own kind. Whoever stood in his way, he would just kill them. Old Bridge Town. Back in town, Kale went straight to the restaurant. When he opened the door, he found that Jane and the other 2 were not the only ones sitting at the table in the corner. There was also Thor, who was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. "Brother Ka, over here." Daisy's seat was facing the door. She was the first to see Kale. She quickly got up and waved in surprise. When Kale walked over, Eric had already made way for him. He said respectfully and fawningly, "Mr. Ka, I've already asked the chef to prepare your meal. I'll have him heat it up and send it over." "Ka, good morning." Jane finished chewing the food in her mouth and greeted Kale with a smile. "Morning." Kale nodded and sat next to Thor. Thor was starving. He was still stuffing beef into his mouth. When he saw the three's enthusiastic attitude towards Kale, he could not help but stare angrily. "Wait, why is there such a big difference in treatment between him and me?" Chapter 307. TSK. You're just a tramp and the card is an urban elite, how can you compare? Daisy immediately choked on Thor, hugged her towering breasts with both hands, and snorted discontentedly. "And let me remind you, everything you wear and eat now is given to you by us out of kindness, don't ask for too much." "How am I a tramp? I'm just an ignorant mortal." Thor swallowed the beef in his mouth, wiped the grease from the corner of his mouth, and picked up a fried chicken leg. His rough face showed a serious look and he said with a little dignity, "I'll say it again. I'm the son of the supreme Odin, Thor the master of thunder, Thor the future lord of the 9 realms." Everyone at the table looked natural as if they were used to it, and quietly bowed their heads and continued to eat. Thor saw that no one paid attention to him and could not help but feel a little discouraged. In the past, wherever he went, he was accompanied by the awe and submission of various alien races, but when he came to Earth, he was even worse than a human. "Okay, hurry up and eat. We'll talk about it after you're full." Jane comforted him. Thor did not reply, and began to gnaw on the chicken leg in his hand unhappily. Kale shook his head secretly. Thor now had no divine power at all, and even his physique had become as weak as a mortal. Even if he deliberately revealed his divine power, there was no way to see through his identity. Kale could see that the purple ability card representing the Protoss was still on Thor, but at this time the card did not have any light, and was in a state of invalid seal. Odin could seal a purple quality ability card, or could it only seal the divine power of the Protoss? Kale thought to himself and raised his eyebrows. Compared to the old monsters like Odin or Alpha Centauri, he could clearly see the gap between him and the top powerhouses in the universe. Regarding the card quality, above purple was gold and above gold was colorless. Every step up was like a heavenly chasm. Kale temporarily compared the purple grade to the planet level. That is to say, having a purple ability card is enough to do whatever you want on a planet. An ability card with a rare purple prefix was already at the top of Earth's current combat power. He, Hulk, and Thor, who had recovered his divine power, were temporarily in this semi-invincible realm. The reason why he was semi-invincible was mainly because there were too few people in this starry sky who had gold or above ability cards. But just because they were few in number didn't mean that they didn't exist. Kale was slowly chewing his food while thinking about something. Suddenly, a strong arm reached out from the side and enthusiastically put it on his shoulder. Thor held a glass in his other hand and downed a large glass of beer. He then smashed the glass on the floor and laughed loudly, "Not bad, another glass." The sound of the cup shattering and the strange cry attracted the attention of the other customers and waiters in the restaurant. The group of people at the corner of the table instantly became the focus of attention. "Well, we'll pay for it," Jane quickly said. Daisy stared at Thor angrily and said in a low voice, "Please, can you stop smashing things? You said you're the son of Odin. So what if you're a god? You can just smash things." "All right, I'll try to control it." Thor also knew that he had done something wrong and sighed embarrassedly. "Another glass, right? Here, drink it." Kale smiled and pushed a glass of beer that he had not drunk over. "All right, you're my friend." Thor's eyes lit up slightly. He patted Kale's shoulder hard, raised the glass with one hand and downed it in one gulp. Daisy and Jane were originally afraid that Thor, a boorish man, would use too much force and hurt Kale. In the end, they were surprised to find that Kale's face was calm. Even his shoulder did not move under Thor's heavy pats. Thor put his hand on Kale's shoulder and suddenly remembered something. He asked, "Right, you just said that this is Earth, right?" Faced with this idiotic question, Daisy rolled her eyes. "Big brother, what's wrong?" "Nothing. If it's Earth, I have an old friend who should be living here." Thor took a deep breath and asked with slight anticipation, "Do you know Kale?" When this question came out, the entire restaurant fell silent again. Then many people shook their heads and laughed secretly. Daisy face-bombed and said jokingly, "Are you sure? Mr. Kale is your old friend?" "Wait a minute, we're talking about two different people." "What's wrong, isn't he silver hair? He looks very young and handsome." He has a bit of my demeanor back then. Thor praised himself and pointed to Kale beside him. He looks a little like him. Many people say so. Kale smiled faintly when he saw them looking at him. No emotion could be seen from his face. Jane looked away and said to Thor, "If you're talking about a symbol of peace, forget about whether we know him or not. There's probably no one in this world who doesn't know him." A symbol of peace? Then it must be him. He became the guardian of our divine realm as a mortal. He shines wherever he goes. Thor's words just happened to hit the spot in Kale's heart. He felt very happy and secretly lamented that he did not waste time and specially came over. Of course, this was also giving Odin enough face. Thor said happily, "Since you know him, then do you have Kale's contact information? Don't you have a phone number or something? Call him over now, and he said that he will receive me well when he goes to Earth." "Aren't I receiving you right now?" Kale secretly complained. Daisy continued to use her poisonous tongue and spread out her hands. "Everyone, I think we should take him back to the hospital. Not only does he have 8th grade syndrome, but he also has very serious paranoia." Jane nodded in agreement this time. Contact the symbol of peace and call him out? There were probably not many people in this world who could do that. Eric, who returned, happened to hear the conversation and smiled as if he was joking. "Okay, I'll pay for this meal. Treat it as treating Mr. Kale, who is far away in New York." Long live the mentor. Daisy cheered happily. Jane frowned slightly and silently looked at Kale, Thor, and Eric. At this moment she seemed to understand something, but she was not completely sure. After all, if her guess was true, it would be too shocking. New York, residential rental building. Eddie was sleeping soundly on the bed with saliva hanging from the corner of his mouth. He was dreaming of becoming a popular reporter and marrying a rich and beautiful woman as soon as possible. Suddenly the room he was in. No, it should be said that the whole building shook violently as if there was an earthquake. All the furniture and lights were shaking left and right. But when the alarm clock at the bedside fell to the ground, Eddie woke up from his dream. He rolled on the bed and stood up, subconsciously looking for slippers to wear. Before he put on his slippers, there was another huge muffled sound and a strong vibration came from the next room again. What's going on next door? Demolition? Eddie panicked. He was only wearing a pair of zebra shorts. He put on his slippers and ran to the door of the room. Chapter 308. Eddie walked to the door of the room, leaned against the door, and put his left eye close to the peephole to look outside. When he saw the situation outside, he sucked in a breath of cold air. His brain, which was still in a daze, was completely awake. A chill ran down his spine and he could no longer complain. Outside the door, the corridor was filled with dust. The door of the bald man's neighbor's room was broken open, and he could see the dark hall without any light. Inside the hall, there were 2 tall and strong humanoid shadows fighting each other. In a few moments, the furniture in the hall was overturned, the stone walls collapsed, and the ceiling collapsed. The entire residential building was shaking. The dull and loud sound of violent fighting was accompanied by the screams and cries for help of the surrounding tenants. This was simply a disaster scene. This is first-line news material. His occupational disease was acting up. Eddie murmured, but the shaking was getting louder and louder. He quickly realized that now was not the time to think about the press release. If he lost his life later, he would become the male lead in the news report. Evacuate first to ensure safety. Eddie took a deep breath, summoned his courage, and unlocked the door. He was ready to quickly open the door and take the opportunity to quickly run to the stairs at the end of the corridor. But just as he finished unlocking the door with a bang, the door of the room shook violently. Eddie quickly retracted his hands. Something crashed into his door. Eddie was shocked and doubtful. With a trace of luck, he put his eyes close to the peephole again. This time he could not see the situation outside. Instead, he was directly faced with a huge and white pupil. They stared at each other. Although Eddie knew about the anti-theft peephole and could not see inside from the outside, he still shivered as if he had fallen into an ice house. That was definitely not a human eye. Eddie's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He kept retreating away from the front door of his house. When he retreated to the corner of the hall, the front door burst off from the wall and flew in. Other than the main entrance, there were also 2 2-meter-tall humanoid monsters that were exposed under the bright lights, as well as Eddie, the owner of the room. Eddie dared to guarantee that even though he was an experienced and knowledgeable journalist and had watched every episode of Animal World, he had never seen a terrifying creature like the one that had broken into his house. One of the monsters had white pupils, ferocious fangs, and black muscle fibers all over its body were swollen. There were white marks on its chest that resembled burning flames. It was the front face that was completely covered in poison. The other monster had green eyes and dark brown skin. Its muscles were covered with hard lumps and there were a few rows of barbs on its back. Its fingernails were sharp, and it was one of the 3 symbiotic demons that had descended in New York. Its name was Bai Li. What both of them had in common was that their bodies were filled with a violent and wild aura. Every inch of their muscles was filled with power as if they were born for battle. You are not of the same race from the symbiotic planet. You are an anomaly. Kill him. Bai Li roared hoarsely, one hand grabbing onto Poison's neck as it sprinted towards the room. Poison's hands were tightly gripping onto Bai Li's arms. His feet were deeply embedded in the floor, and the soles of his feet were smoothly plowed backwards. Get out of my way, you behind me. Poison growled. Eddie, who was behind Bai Li, was stunned for a moment before he reacted and moved from the corner to the bathroom on the other side. As soon as Eddie's foot left the bathroom, Poison came to an abrupt halt. It grabbed onto Bai Li's hand, the muscles on its arms bulging as it moved Bai Li away from its neck. It then threw Bai Li over its shoulder and slammed him into the corner of the wall. Boom. The wall in the corner was like a piece of paper and a hole appeared in the wall. Bai Li's head was buried in a pile of rubble, and only 2 thick legs could be seen. Seeing such an exaggerated level of destruction, Eddie's jaw dropped. The first thought that flashed through his mind was, it's over. I'm going to have to pay the landlord for the repairs. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get out of here. Poison rolled its eyes. Its attitude towards Eddie was somewhat of a friendly neighbor. Okay. Eddie nodded like a chick pecking at rice. With his back against the wall, he ran around the pile of rubble that Bai Li was in and towards the door. Before Eddie could take more than a few steps, Bai Li roared and quickly flipped over. Rubble and dust flew everywhere, mixed with a sharp dark brown light. Before Poison could dodge, its body was severely injured. A dark brown giant spear pierced through its chest and through its back. Black liquid spilled onto the floor like fresh blood. Damn it. Poison struggled with a hoarse voice. It reached out and grabbed the handle of the spear in front of it. It wanted to stop the spear, but the end of the spear was in Bai Li's hand. You're finished? Bai Li laughed sinisterly. He charged forward and used the spear to push Poison off the ground. The tip of the spear pierced through the wall beside the door. It's not that easy. Poison found that it was impossible to break free. It let go of the spear and turned from defense to offense. It waved its hands at Bai Li. In the short moment it waved its hands, Poison's arms elongated and turned into black spikes with spiral drill bits. Pfft. Bai Li's laughter stopped abruptly. It looked down and saw that the spikes had pierced through its chest. Dark brown liquid flowed down. You. Bai Li took a step back, trying to pull the spikes away. In the end, the toxin reacted even faster. It connected the tips of the 2 spikes together, and it looked like a chain was used to lock the bones of the host inside Billy. Bai Li had no choice but to hold the spear with both hands. That's more like it. Poison smiled. Shockingly, both sides had suffered great losses and were in a stalemate. You're really something. But my host is obviously much stronger. I'm still the winner. Bai Li sneered and held the spear firmly to prevent Poison from escaping. Poison heard this and pursed its lips. The bodies of both monsters were melting, but Bai Li was obviously faster. Its head had already melted, revealing the face of its host, the bald man. At this moment, a surprised voice came from the side. Neighbor? Poison looked sideways and saw that Eddie was still in the room. His back was against the wall and he was watching them from a safe distance of 5 meters. Are you okay? Aid asked Dudu nervously. Dudu had kindly reminded him twice, and he hadn't forgotten his life-saving grace. I'm fine, but something will happen soon. Poison smiled bitterly. Suddenly, an idea came to him and he asked in a hoarse voice, Do you have gas in your house? Yes, why? Eddie was stunned. Turn on the switch and let the gas leak in. Quick. Poison said. Bai Li didn't know what gas was, but his subconscious warned him not to let Poison succeed. His face twisted and he warned Eddie, Boy, I advise you to leave now. Otherwise, when I'm done with the other worldlings, I'll eat you alive. Eddie was a little hesitant at first, but after hearing Bai Li's words, he shrugged and walked to the kitchen. He sighed and said, Because of your threat, I'm going to waste my time with you today. Chapter 309. Damned Brat. Seeing that Eddie dared to go against his will, Bai Li was instantly enraged. His green pupils flashed with a cold light as he kicked with all his might, pulling Poison's twin spikes back. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws in an attempt to kill Eddie first. "Just stay here obediently," Poison sneered. Its host could not hold on for much longer. Its body was on the verge of disintegration, and its body was pinned to the wall by Li's spear. The black liquid from its body flowed down to the ground. However, it still used its arm to lock Li tightly, preventing him from breaking free of its 3-meter radius, endangering Eddie's personal safety. The deadlock between the two of them with a force of more than 10 tons shook the entire room. The seemingly sturdy walls and floor were on the verge of collapsing, and dust filled the room. "Bastard! Watch me eat you alive!" Li roared angrily, and a part of the liquid in its body began to flow back, covering Poison's chest along the spear, and gradually began to devour Poison's body. "Hurry up!" Poison shouted hoarsely, but his words were not directed at Li, but towards Eddie's direction. "Understood." Without hesitation, Eddie rushed into the kitchen, pulled out the gas pipe and closed the window. "Landlord, you can't blame me for this." Eddie sighed helplessly, gritted his teeth, and turned the gas switch on while his head was still hot. In a few seconds, the pungent smell of gas rushed into his nostrils, and after filling the narrow kitchen space, it leaked out through the door and into the hall. Eddie covered his nose and mouth, turned around and rushed out of the hall. He found that Poison and Li were still wrestling, and their upper bodies had already melted to the point that they could no longer be seen as humans. The dark black liquid and the dark brown liquid were wrapped around the lower body of their respective hosts, and they were floating and moving like snakes entangled together to tear at each other. But obviously the adult Li had the absolute upper hand, and the dark brown liquid covered 1/5 of Poison's body. "Okay, what do we do next?" Eddie asked worriedly. Poison struggled to resist Li's devouring, and the small head formed by the black liquid said hoarsely, "It's simple. After 10 seconds, ignite." Eddie nodded subconsciously, but after figuring out the concept of igniting the gas, his eyes couldn't help but widen. He opened his mouth wide in shock. "You said ignite the gas?" "Yes. If you don't want to die, do it. You heard what it said just now. If it's still alive, you're done for." Toxin replied triumphantly. "You bastard, you schemed against me." Eddie smiled bitterly. On second thought, from the moment he chose to stay and turn on the gas, he was already on the same side as Toxin. "We've already come this far. There's no turning back." Eddie made his choice and did not complain anymore. He found a lighter from the overturned desk drawer. 10 seconds passed quickly and gas began to fill the entire hall. Hearing the conversation between Poison and Eddie, Billy could roughly guess what the gas was. He screamed in horror, "You weirdo, you want to die with me? Who wants to die with you?" Poison laughed and retorted, "Don't tell me you don't know? Our kind is most afraid of fire and ultrasound," Billy said fearfully. Toxin did not answer. Instead, he urged Eddie to quickly say, "Time's up. Go to the corridor and ignite the gas in the room." "Got it." Eddie covered his mouth and nose with his hand. Under the cover of Toxin, he smoothly passed through the door and arrived at the corridor where the air was still relatively clean. After escaping the danger in the room, Eddie's subconscious told him not to do anything else. He quickly left the corridor and left the nightmarish catastrophe of life. Billy Lee's warning, Toxin's warning, echoed faintly in his ears. Eddie took 2 steps and stopped. He looked at the metal lighter lying on his palm. At this time, Toxin's voice came from the room behind him. "Are you done? Hurry up and ignite. I can't hold on any longer. If I die, then I die. I'm still a virgin." Eddie was incomparably sorrowful. He used the lighter to ignite the flame and threw it into the room behind him. Whoosh, the flaming lighter rotated a few times and swept past Toxin and Billy Lee. Under Billy Lee's desperate scream, the flammable gas in the room instantly reacted. Boom. People on the streets of the residential area looked up in horror. They could clearly see a huge explosion on the 5th floor of the rental building. The shock wave formed by the explosion broke the windows and windows. Billowing flames and thick black smoke billowed out. Inside the room. In just a moment, Billy Lee's body and screams were all drowned in a sea of flames. It's really over. Eddie watched the flames and the explosion rush towards the door. He did not waste any more energy to escape and closed his eyes. The moment before the explosion enveloped Eddie, a black shadow quickly swept past and attached itself to his body. Then everything was destroyed in the explosion. 5 minutes later, fire trucks and police cars arrived late at the scene with sirens blaring. They began rescue operations in the building and pulled up a cordon to disperse the crowd. Half an hour later, 3 low-key black commercial vehicles with sword and shield markings, and a silver Chevrolet marked with a card markings, arrived at the scene of the disaster almost at the same time. The police officers who were still cordoning off the scene seemed to have been notified beforehand and gave the green light. The vehicles stopped in front of the empty building. A glamorous woman with short bright red hair and a group of armed agents quickly got out of the SELD vehicle. She followed closely behind. A cool girl with short dark green hair and 3 men in suits got out of the exclusive car of the unnatural firm. Why didn't you Tong come this time? Natasha asked in surprise. She is wearing a consistent tight black leather jacket, and her slender and exquisite figure curves are exposed at a glance. She looks very sexy and capable. After sitting in the position of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s deputy director for a long time, she also has a faint majesty and calmness. What, can't I do it? Luna snorted with dissatisfaction and crossed her arms. She was wearing a masculine shirt and suit with the exclusive devil card logo of Family Cow. Compared to Natasha's sexiness, she was more unique and stunning. She also had a domineering aura that seeped into her bones. Nothing, then let's go together. Natasha shrugged and did not talk back to her. She led the way upstairs. The two often bickered when they were together. The main reason was, Natasha did not like Luna's willful and casual way of doing things. Luna did not like Natasha's strictness and sexiness. When two superior beauties met, there was bound to be a fight. Of course, when two beauties with distinct styles walked together, it became a beautiful scene in New York City. Few people knew that they were both black rank members of Family Cow. Chapter 310. Natasha and Luna walked up to the 5th floor one after another. They came to the corridor on the 5th floor, which was full of burn marks. Although the fire had been put out by the firefighters, a faint burnt smell still lingered in the air. Some police officers were still going in and out of the rooms affected by the explosion, taking photos and collecting materials for analysis. When they saw Natasha and Luna, the leader of the local police, Alan, a tall and burly black police officer, took the lead and greeted them with a smile on his dark and square face. I'm Alan, the police officer in charge. You two should be Deputy Director Natasha and Secretary Luna, right? S.H.L.D., Deputy Director. Natasha nodded and took out her ID, which had S.H.L.D.'s exclusive authentication mark on it. Unnatural firm, Senior Secretary. Luna curled her lips and put her hands in the pockets of her trousers. She had no intention of taking out her ID. Officer Allen didn't care about this and nodded. Even though Luna was only a secretary, the weight of the person behind her was enough to be worth several S.H.L.D.s. Let's talk about the situation first. Natasha took back her ID and went straight to the point. Officer Allen pointed around and said simply, we have collected a large amount of witness information, according to the tenants on the 5th floor of the rental building. Half an hour ago, around 2300 hours New York time, there were 2 humanoid monsters fighting in room 508. Later, the fight extended to room 509. The gas explosion was also caused by room 509. Currently, it's preliminarily determined to be man-made. Who are the tenants of these 2 rooms? Luna asked, not to be outdone. Officer Allen took out his phone and looked for the personal information that he had asked the headquarters to check. He said, the tenant of room 508 is Owen Weil. 36 years old, English. He used to work in a barbecue restaurant in Boston, but now he's unemployed. He came to New York City the day before yesterday and paid a month's rent for this room. He paused and continued, in room 509 where the gas explosion happened, we found Owen Weil's body. He died very tragically and only his charred bones were left. What about the tenant in room 509? Natasha seemed to have caught the key point. That's the strange part. Alan shrugged and said seriously, the tenant is Eddie. He's 24 years old and a top student who just graduated from the University of California. He was hired by a famous news agency in New York not long ago. He also came to New York the day before yesterday. He went to report to the company yesterday and worked until 20 p.m. today. It's strange that he didn't die in the explosion, right? Luna said. Officer Allen nodded and said in a deep voice, there are no traces of Eddie's corpse at the scene. Not only that, Eddie had never left the building. He had mysteriously disappeared with the 2 monsters in the explosion. We have issued a tracking order and mobilized the local police force to find Eddie's whereabouts. Natasha and Luna looked at each other. Both of them had a thoughtful expression on their faces. Officer Allen, right? Natasha smiled and said without hesitation, "You can take your people and leave the scene on the 5th floor now. You just need to maintain the lockdown of the building. This is not something the police can handle. Just hand over all the files to us, HELD. And us, the unnatural firm," Luna chimed in. "Okay, I understand." Officer Allen agreed without hesitation. HELD's ability and authority were even higher than the military in New York. It was normal for them to give orders to the police. Not long after, Officer Allen took a dozen police officers and left the scene in an orderly manner. Only a small team was left to maintain the lockdown of the building. HELD agents and K2 began to take out all kinds of high-tech equipment from their suitcases. They studied the scene of the explosion in detail and recovered the video data of the fight between the two symbiotic creatures. Natasha looked at Luna, who had her hands in her pocket, and asked, "Luna, what do you think? Are you insulting my IQ? Since we know some of the characteristics of the symbiotic creatures from the Family Master, we can basically draw a conclusion to the battle here in advance." Luna said with certainty, "The flame has the ability to completely wipe out the symbiotic creatures. Also, there was a corpse left at the scene. It proves that the battle was decided at the moment of the explosion. One of them died and the other escaped." "That's what I thought. Also, the symbiotic creature that escaped was living in Eddie's body." Natasha licked her lips in surprise when she said this. Even the family head probably didn't expect that the symbiotic demons that invaded from outer space would actually engage in internal strife. At the same time, New York City, Hudson River. What? A dark and tall humanoid monster sprinted and climbed up the bridge. Finally, it jumped down the river that was 100 meters high. The river that reflected the light of the night immediately became turbulent. 10 seconds later, a young man's head emerged from the shallow water of the river. Then his shoulders, waist, legs. Eddie gasped for breath. He walked from the shallow water to the shore and collapsed on the cement ground. His whole body was wet and in a sorry state. "What happened to me? Just now, I turned into a black monster?" Eddie still had a lingering fear. He shivered in the night wind, and his hands kept groping his body, which was only wearing a pair of underpants. He didn't even let go of his little brother. He touched him all over but didn't find anything strange. When Eddie was about to let out a sigh of relief, a black liquid seeped out from his chest. It rotated and turned into a snake. Its head was a miniature version of Toxin's head. "You're looking for me?" Toxin grinned, revealing a row of uneven teeth. You, how did you get on my body?" Eddie stepped back in fear. But Toxin had already joined with him. When he stepped back, Toxin also retreated. "Young man, if it wasn't for me, you would have died in the explosion just now." Toxin sneered. "So it was you who saved me." Eddie's emotions calmed down a bit. He quickly reacted and said angrily, "It's all because of you. You wanted me to set the gas on fire. Now it's great. My house blew up. I've become a murderer." "The one you just killed isn't human," Toxin corrected. "Do you think the New York police will believe your nonsense?" "My life is over," Eddie said dejectedly as he knelt on the ground in despair, giving up on himself. "You have some potential to become my new host. Please pull yourself together." Toxin comforted Eddie and said proudly, "You saw my strength just now. You and I are one. You are an omnipotent Superman. Why are you afraid of the police?" "Oh, please let me go." Eddie was even more desperate. "Sorry." Toxin grinned and said confidently, "You are now the host's spare tire. Before I find a suitable host, I will live in your body." Chapter 311. Mexico, Old Bridge Town, in the restaurant's own single toilet. After listening to the situation of the two-headed symbiotic demon in New York, Kale nodded gently at Yutong's holographic projection. His handsome and cold face had a hint of deep meaning as he said, "Okay, I got it." "What do you need us to do?" Yutong asked softly. Kale thought for a moment and ordered, "For the time being, let K2 not look for other symbiotic demons. First, find the symbiotic demon attached to Eddie. I'm a little interested in that symbiotic demon." "Okay, I'll urge Luna to be more diligent." Yutong smiled slightly and then turned off the holographic communication. The single toilet was silent again. "Master, do you really think there is a symbiotic demon that is not afraid of fire?" Venom said with a complicated mood. "One must know that no matter how it evolved, even when it entered adulthood and developed various combat modes, it still could not get rid of the fatal weakness of fire and ultrasonic waves. Especially the fear of fire, it made Kale unable to rely on the symbiotic demon to carry out the full coverage buff under the fire god's divine power. To a certain extent, its combat power was greatly reduced. And now, there was a symbiotic demon that was suspected to not be afraid of fire. This was simply a blatant mockery for Venom. It hasn't been confirmed yet, it's just a certain probability. Besides, even if it doesn't have the weakness of fire, it can't be compared to you. Kale comforted Venom, which was rare. After so many battles and incidents, Venom and Vice were his left and right shoulders respectively. The two together with Kale could achieve omnipotence in various fields. Let's take care of things here first, then go back to New York. After Kale finished, he opened the door and left the toilet. Just as he returned to the restaurant, he happened to see Thor leave the table and walk to a few guests at the next table with a straight face. Thor. Jane and others stood up in confusion, afraid that he would do something brainless again. What were you talking about just now, can you tell me? Thor walked to the next table and asked a bearded man with bare arms. Of course. The bearded man grinned and gestured with his hands and feet. He said vividly, about 30 miles south of this town, there's a pothole. There's a small hammer-shaped meteorite that can't be taken out no matter how hard you try. Even a full-powered off-road vehicle can't move it at all. Have we been discovered? Kale could not help but shake his head when he heard this. 30 miles south, is it? Saul nodded seriously and thanked him before returning to the table where Jane and the others were sitting. The bearded man waved his hand and looked at Thor's back. He kindly reminded him, hey, it's too late to go there now. There's a group of suspected armed personnel from the government that has completely sealed off that place. Thor returned to the dining table without a care and nodded at Kale, who had returned. He then said to Jane and the others, I should go. Are you interested in that small meteorite? Jane asked with a frown. That's not a meteorite, it's Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Thor was obviously very excited and spoke a little faster, so much so that the pronunciation of Mjolnir was a little strange. Daisy was confused. She tilted her head cutely and asked, Meow meow? What's meow meow? It's Mjolnir, a hammer, Thor repeated. Oh, Mjolnir hammer. Daisy suddenly understood. Kale was speechless. Odin would cry if he called Thor's hammer, which controlled thunder and power, Mjolnir hammer. I'll remember you. When I get Mjolnir back, I'll definitely come back to thank you. Thor said this and left the dining room without looking back. Should we stop him? Daisy shrugged and looked at the others. Eric asked straightforwardly, can you stop him? That's true. Daisy didn't feel sorry for Thor's departure at all. After all, she wasn't interested in astronomical research. Her slightly hot eyes kept lingering on Kale. Kale didn't care. He continued to enjoy the food calmly as if he didn't see it. He was thinking about other things silently. If Thor could retrieve Thor's hammer so easily, he wouldn't have wasted his time coming out of New York. Since this was Odin's special experience in the mortal world, it should look like an experience. How could it be called an experience without some pain and torture? It was more appropriate to call it a day trip to Earth. After we finish eating, we can follow and take a look. Kale pondered for a moment and gave a simple opinion. I have no objections. Eric was the first to agree. Me too. Daisy agreed. After Mr. Card said that, you guys changed too quickly. Jane was speechless. However, she was thinking about Thor's matter and identity, so she had no reason to reject Kale's suggestion. She could only agree. When the group finished eating, it was almost noon. Jane and the others returned to the place where they stayed and parked. They were surprised to find a group of people in suits rummaging through their caravan and room. They took out laptops, equipment and other items and were about to take them away. People from SHELD. As expected, the location of Thor's hammer was blocked by them. Kale recognized the identity of the people in suits at a glance. He put his hands in his pockets and walked behind the group. He didn't want to expose his identity. What are you doing? Stop. That's our stuff. You're infringing on our personal property. Robbers. Jane jumped on the spot and rushed forward, but was stopped by a few men in suits who grabbed her arms. Hey. Daisy saw that her friend was stopped and wanted to go over to help. Eric hurriedly pulled her back and asked the people in suits with a serious expression. Gentlemen, can you explain the current situation? We're astronomers. We haven't done anything illegal. Let me explain. Agents, let go of this young lady first. A calm and steady voice sounded. Two people in suits immediately let go of Jane's arms and stepped back to make way. A middle-aged man in a suit walked out from behind and took out a work ID with a sword and shield symbol. He said to Jane in a gentle and friendly manner, "You must be Miss Foster. I'm Agent Carlson from SHELD. Due to some situations, I need to access your records and astronomical observation data. This is your compensation," Carlson said as he took out a bank check for $100,000 and handed it to Jane. Jane couldn't accept it and said angrily, "Aren't you being too forceful and overbearing? And some of my equipment is custom-made. You can't buy it at all." "I'm sorry." Carlson had a smile on his face, but he wouldn't change his decision. HELD's authority was focused and powerful. In order to work efficiently, they could do many things that even the military wouldn't dare to do casually. Normal legal cases were ineffective against them. Jane watched as her notebook and equipment were carried into SHLD's car. She was unwilling to give up and wanted to snatch it back. The experienced Eric quickly walked up and pulled Jane back after he steadied Daisy. "Jane, don't mess with them." Eric's face was unprecedentedly serious. He said nervously in a low voice, "They're from SHELD. We can't afford to offend them." "What department is SHELD?" Daisy came over and asked gloomily. Eric sighed and said, "It's a secret department behind the country. I used to have a professor friend who studied gamma radiation. After SHLD came to his door, he never appeared again." "That exaggerated." Jane and Daisy gasped. They were both shocked. Chapter 312. "That's right, it's that exaggerated." Eric spread his hands helplessly. For ordinary people, the intelligence agencies with the backing of the state had authority that they could not afford to offend, and those intelligence agencies were the hired thugs of SHLD. With the function of SHLD, they could mobilize the local police and military forces at will, and direct any local government department to coordinate actions. Jane and Daisy were surprised and doubtful, and from the corner of their eyes they saw Carlson, who was not far away, suddenly walk toward Cale, who was standing alone. Daisy exclaimed and wanted to pull Cale back. "Daisy, wait a minute." Eric hurriedly grabbed her and also watched the two meet. He said calmly, "It's okay. If it's him, things may turn around." Jane narrowed her eyes after hearing this and looked at Cale with slight expectation. This time she could also verify the guess in her heart. "Hello, sir." Carlson walked to Cale and took the initiative to reach out his hand in a friendly manner. He looked at his face and said in confusion, "I always feel that you're a little familiar, as if I've seen you somewhere before." "Probably." Cale nodded calmly and shook hands with Carlson. In just a moment, Carlson's face changed slightly, and he awkwardly withdrew his palm with dents. "If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I have something to do with a few friends." Cale gestured in the direction of Jane and the others, and then left without paying attention to him. "Take care." Carlson exhaled and said calmly. After Cale and the others left, Carlson still stood motionless, frowning and thinking about something. "Sir, what's wrong? Is there a problem with that Mr. Card just now?" Two agents came forward and asked in confusion. "Card." Carlson suddenly opened his eyes wide, and his emotions were difficult to calm down. He hurriedly asked, "That person just now was called Mr. Card?" "Yes. I just found it. There are relevant files and information in the headquarters." The agent replied. "It really is him. He actually appeared here. All right, everything is fine now." Carlson patted his chest. He was also suspicious just now, but it was not until now that he completely confirmed Cale's identity. "Sir, who is that?" The two new agents obviously did not understand the meaning of the alias Card. "If I tell you, I'll probably scare you, so I'll keep it to myself. Hurry up and pack your things and drive away from here." Carlson sighed and looked at the red mark on his palm, feeling depressed that he had asked for a snub. God had not left New York City for half a year, but now he was traveling the human world. Carlson sighed in his heart. He took out his mobile phone and found Director Frey's contact number. No matter what, this matter had to be reported to the chief. Ever since the internal strife at SHLD half a year ago, the old agents in the bureau would tremble whenever they saw a statue that symbolized peace. The bloody scene of the massacre at the headquarters of SHLD was still fresh in their minds. There were indeed many departments and people under SHLD, but they were always under one person. This fact was believed to be deeply etched in the minds of many agents. Meeting with Carlson, the attitude of meeting a stranger, made Jane's speculation about Cale's identity fade a lot. This was a good thing. After all, Cale did not want to expose his true identity too early. It was very convenient and simple to blend in with the small scientific research team of ordinary people and secretly help Thor. If Thor knew that he was here, he would probably complain about why he did not help him return to the divine realm. Kale did not want to get involved in his own family's drama in the divine realm. Kale followed Jane and the others back to the station wagon. Jane drove the car out of town and prepared to go to the place where the meteorite fell. Before the car left town, they met Thor, who wanted to buy a warhorse from the shop assistant at a pet shop on the side of the road. Thor was probably used to flying. After losing his divine power and Thor's hammer, it would probably take him a day to walk 30 miles with the body of a mortal. So, after careful consideration, he wanted to find a warhorse to ride. This prince from the divine realm, after being ruthlessly mocked by Daisy again, finally sat in the back of the station wagon. Facing the afternoon sun, the station wagon drove out of town, stirring up a cloud of dust in the wilderness, heading straight to the destination 30 miles south. When they approached the meteorite crater, the sun had already sunk below the horizon, the light and temperature were all reduced, and night shrouded the cold and uninhabited wilderness. The station wagon, like a lonely traveler, turned on the headlights and continued to move forward. Two faint beams of light cut through the night. When they were about half a mile away from the destination, Kale, who was in the passenger seat, suggested that everyone get out of the car and walk the rest of the way instead of driving. Before the group understood the intention, Thor had already opened the door and got out of the back of the car. He walked to the small slope and looked into the distance. They could see a circle of light like a small city, faintly covering the sky above the meteorite crater. Brother Kai's right. This piece of metal called a car is too conspicuous. We can only walk the rest of the way, Saul said. He couldn't help but move. His feet sped up as he moved towards the light source. Kale followed in silence. Seeing this, the others could only bite the bullet and continue to move forward. 10 minutes later. The group arrived near the crater, lowered their bodies, and lay on the edge of the slope to look down. They saw that with the meteorite crater as the center, a large modern research base had been built on the spot. The third floor of the building was brightly lit, and there were figures of staff conducting investigation work inside. A protective wire fence marked with high-voltage electricity was set up around the research base. Many armed personnel patrolled the area, and even more supplies were being transported in large cars and planes. Eric lowered his voice and said, "They built a temporary fortress in less than half a day. This must be SHELD's great work. If it's just a meteorite, why didn't they take it? Why did they have to build a city here?" Jane asked in confusion. "Yes, it's superfluous." Daisy agreed with him. "It's simple. Because they can't take it. You guys stay here. I'll go take back what belongs to me." Thor could not hold back anymore. He walked out on his own and rushed toward the protective wire fence under the cover of the night. "That bastard, doesn't he know he'll drag us down with him? Carl, what should we do now?" Daisy said in annoyance. She turned around and was shocked to find that Kale, who had been following behind the group, had disappeared without a trace. "Where's Mr. Carl?" Jane also noticed. "Probably he went with him." Eric smiled bitterly and pointed at Thor's back. At the same time, HELD, temporary research base inside the research base. In the middle of the research base, the silver hammer had not been moved. It was placed in the middle of the meteorite crater. Researchers in white went in and out, holding measuring instruments beside the hammer to collect data. Carlson presided over the overall situation. He stood in the control room on the second floor of the temporary research base and looked down at a series of detailed work around the hammer. Suddenly, as if an enemy had invaded, the alarm of the temporary base rang loudly and urgently through the night sky. Enemy attack. Chapter 313. Lightning flashed in the wilderness, dark clouds covered the night sky, and as the cold wind blew, heavy rain suddenly fell. The alarm in the temporary base sounded, and the armed personnel stationed there moved. Carlson frowned, took out his communicator and dialed, connected to the monitoring room and asked in a deep voice, "What happened?" The person in charge on the other side of the communicator immediately replied, "Sir, we just found out that the defensive net in the south of the base has not been electrified yet, and there is a hole in the corner." A strong blond man with a height of 1.8 meters forced his way into the temporary base and even knocked out 2 guards on duty. He is heading to the research room in the center of the base. Carlson's face was calm and he said coldly, "Got it, let the guards continue to maintain the patrol order, and let the SHELD agents deal with the intruder." "Yes, sir." After hanging up, Carlson continued to dial a private personal line, and soon an indifferent and magnetic male voice answered, "I'm here. The items in this temporary research room are very important. It's better if you take care of it," Carlson informed. "Okay." On the other side of the communicator. In the warehouse on the first floor of the temporary base, a black-haired agent in an agent uniform opened the door of the armory, and his hawk-like cold eyes lingered on the row of iron shelves that displayed various types of firearms. The black-haired agent picked up a modern sniper rifle, weighed it in his hand and quickly put it back. Without hesitation, he took the special composite bow on the top row, and a quiver filled with many strange arrows. Then he quickly rushed out of the armory and went up the stairs. When he reached the roof of the third floor, he reached out and climbed up to the temporary rooftop of the base. At this moment, in the research room, Thor ran down the corridor panting. When he was about to reach the corner, a burly black agent with a bear-like physique blocked his way. "Mortal, don't block my way." Thor heard the thunder outside, looked at the burly agent who was half a head taller than him, and clenched his fists tightly as he threatened. The divine dominion had changed, and he did not want to waste any more time here. "If you want to go, then beat me to the ground." The black agent sneered and clenched his sandbag-sized fists, making cracking sounds. There was no point in talking, just do it. Thor let out a low growl and rushed forward like a brute. He then wrestled with the black agent at close range with his bare hands. After a while, the two of them were entangled in a fight. They broke through the wall of the Temporary Research Institute and fell into the open-air crater. Due to the heavy rain, the crater had become a bumpy quagmire. Two tall and strong men fell into it and were instantly covered in mud. They threw punches and kicks at each other without caring about anything else. For a moment it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. The scene was clearly seen by Carlson on the second floor and the black-haired agent who had climbed to the top of the dome. The black-haired agent stood alone on the narrow rooftop. He took out a special steel arrow and knocked it on the string of a special composite bow. He aimed down with one eye and drew a crescent moon arc, aiming at the back of Thor's head in the hole. No matter how close Thor and the black agent were and how they kept changing their positions during the fight, the sharp and cold tip of the arrow always followed the target and adjusted its position. "I'm in position. Do you want me to kill the intruder?" The black-haired agent asked expressionlessly. Hearing the voice from the communicator, Carlson pondered for a moment. Seeing that the intruder was about to beat the black agent to the ground, he finally nodded and gave the order, "Kill." "Understood." The black-haired agent's eyes were deep. He held his breath and was not affected by the heavy rain. His hands holding the bow were as steady as a machine. Below the hole, Thor knocked the black agent to the ground with a punch. He shook his wet hair and walked tiredly toward the silver hammer in the center of the hole. He did not notice the fatal danger coming from the side of his head. "It's over," the black-haired agent muttered in a low voice. Just as he was about to release the arrow and let the special arrowhead shoot Thor's head, a hand was placed on the tip of the arrow from behind without any warning and lowered down to shift the target. "Oh, who is it?" The black-haired agent trembled and turned his head in shock. He did not know when, but a young and handsome silver-haired man was standing behind him. "Using a special bow. You should be the Hawkeye Clint Barton that Natasha often mentioned, right?" Kale smiled and looked down at Thor in the crater. He said in a calm and dignified tone, "The one down there is my friend. Do me a favor and don't shoot him." "Who the hell are you?" Hawkeye was still in a state of extreme shock. As a shooting expert, what he feared the most was having the enemy get close to him, especially when he was defenseless. But just now, from the moment the intruder appeared to the moment he tried to stop him, even with his high vigilance and sensitivity, he could not detect the slightest trace of abnormality. The intruder seemed to have appeared out of thin air. If it was really an enemy, he would have died countless times just now. Kale did not answer. If he could not even guess the intruder's identity, it would be a disgrace to the hero code name Hawkeye. "You just mentioned Natasha, silver-haired, too young?" Hawkeye was stunned for half a second, then he reacted and took back his bow. He clenched his fist and bowed and said in awe, "Mr. Kale. You have a good eye." Kale nodded and asked him to be quiet. He continued to look down at the situation in the crater. "Is that person also here?" Carlson was slightly stunned when he vaguely heard the conversation on the other side of the communicator. Then his face became serious, and his puzzled eyes also fell on Thor in the crater. "For him?" In the crater washed by the heavy rain, the mud on Thor's body was gradually washed away. He breathed calmly and walked to the side of the silver hammer and stopped. With joy on his face, He lowered his body and held the handle of the hammer with his habitual right hand, trying to lift it high as usual. But no matter how hard he tried, the hammer did not move. Thor's smile froze on his face, and the air was full of awkward atmosphere. He did not give up and used his hands, exerting all his strength, but the fact that he could not lift the hammer did not change. Thor let go of his hands. At this moment he suddenly understood his situation. His father Odin exiled him, and Thor's hammer no longer recognized him. All his strength, divine power, honor, and pride no longer existed. He was even worse than a mortal. Bang! Thor knelt on the mud beside the hammer and looked up at the night sky, like a wounded beast, making a heart-wrenching roar in the heavy rain. Sure enough, Kale, who had already known the outcome, was not surprised. He patted Hawkeye on the shoulder and said, "Knock him out with anesthetic and lock him up. After that, an astronomer will come to pick him up and let him go." Good. Hawkeye did not understand Kale's intention, but he instinctively obeyed the order. From the moment Kale appeared here, the highest authority was transferred from Coulson. Chapter 3:14. It was 1 o'clock in the morning in downtown New York. Most of the buildings were closed, and only the 24-hour stores were still a little bit crowded. The neon lights on the streets gave off a dim yellow light, and some empty taxis shuttled through the main road from time to time. A young man wearing jeans and a hooded windbreaker had his hands in his trouser pockets. He was slightly bent over, his head was lowered, and his face was buried in the shadow of the hat. He was wandering around the deserted street like a homeless man. Eddie. His current situation was similar to Thor in Mexico. Thor. As a top student who had just graduated from the University of California, he had just reported to the news company in New York for 2 days. He had been dreaming about getting promoted, getting married, and reaching the pinnacle of his life. But in the end, overnight, not only did he blow up the room he rented, but he also became a murder suspect and was arrested by the New York police. Most importantly, there was a symbiotic life inside his body that didn't care if he lived or died. F***ck, I'm so unlucky today. Eddie cursed in a low voice. His mind suddenly buzzed, and then, like a voice in his heart, he retorted in a hoarse voice, Hey, how can you say that? Become my host, this is the day you'll be reborn." Eddie forced a smile. Toxin said unhappily, "Cheer up. Aren't there many examples of ordinary people becoming supermen in New York? For example, Captain America, the symbol of peace. Do you think, with our transformations, we're more like heroes or villains?" Eddie was speechless. "Although that's the case. But what you're going to do next is to save New York and world peace." Toxin coughed softly and explained seriously, "In the battle just now, I swallowed part of the symbiotic life form's body and got its memory fragments. They came to Earth this time to inspect this place in advance and develop it into an alien colony. If one of them returns to their original planet, it will bring thousands of symbiotic life forms to attack Earth." "Isn't that monster already dead?" Eddie asked in surprise. Toxin said straightforwardly, "Yes. But there were 4 of them. Now that one is dead, there are 3 left. To deal with such a powerful monster, and 3 of them? You might as well ask me to kill myself." Eddie howled in pain. He stopped in the aisle and scratched his hair irritably, which startled a stray dog on the side of the road. The stray dog glared at him angrily, baring its teeth and drooling disgusting saliva. Its eyes flashed with a green cold light in the night. "F***ck off. Don't mess with me." Eddie glared back angrily. Under the dim neon lights, the face hidden under the hood was slightly distorted into the face of a black monster. Its long and narrow protruding white eyes were surging with ferocity and murderous intent. Its bloody mouth was wide enough to bite off a human head, and it had a mouthful of many sharp and ferocious fangs. "Oh whoa." The vicious dog was scared in seconds with its tail between its legs. It fled in panic with its limbs unstable. Soon it disappeared at the intersection. Eddie's face returned to its original appearance. He sighed helplessly and continued to walk forward aimlessly. "They have very obvious weaknesses, namely fire and ultrasonic waves. As long as we make good use of this, it's not impossible to kill the 3 symbiotic demons." As a reporter, Eddie caught the flaw in his thinking. He asked, "Wait, aren't you the same as them? Why do you want to help Earth? This is too fake." Toxin was silent. After a while, Toxin said coldly, "To be honest, Earth doesn't matter to me. What happens to Earth has nothing to do with me. I just want to find the meaning of my existence. Although we are of the same race as the symbiotic demons, we were born on different planets. So you're not in the same group? Then you're looking for your parents now? Eddie said. Even he felt it was a bit strange. Alien version of a tadpole looking for its mother? This question seemed to have touched Toxin's sore spot. It said in annoyance, I don't know. Don't ask me. If you ask me again, I'll bite your head off. Eddie shrugged and said, You can't bite me even if I let you. Also, I'm your host now. We share the same life. If I die, you can't live either. Toxin was speechless. It didn't think that not only was its adaptability strong, but Eddie's human adaptability was also not to be underestimated. Eddie was about to say something when a black tentacle suddenly stretched out from behind him. It stretched out into the side alley and pulled his whole body into it. What's wrong? Eddie was surprised. A few seconds later, he saw a police car with its siren blaring slowly drive across the road. It seemed to be patrolling and searching for something. Police car. The police are still looking for me? Eddie was terrified. He asked Toxin in a panic, What should we do? Before we can find the symbiotic demons, the New York police will kill us first. What are you afraid of? I'm here. Toxin snorted in disdain. The host's physical fitness was not bad, but his mentality was too unstable. He still needed to be properly trained. Don't tell me you want to kill people. Eddie didn't know how many times this had happened. He sighed again and turned to walk out of the alley. However, a black shadow flashed in front of him and 3 people in black appeared at the entrance of the alley. Be careful. They're not normal people. Toxin's voice rang in Eddie's mind. Eddie took a step back and looked at the 3 people blocking his way cautiously. There were 2 men and a woman. The men were tall and burly while the woman was slim. They all wore a full set of black combat leather and wore a grinning devil mask. Their equipment was also very strange. One of them carried a Barrett sniper rifle that was as tall as a person. Another had a cold weapon tied to their waist. Another had a pair of huge metal guns with barrels tied to their legs. Team F, we found the target. He's beside the alley at 654 Hatta Street. As the leader of the 3, a man quickly spoke into the high-tech tactical communications watch. The woman in black looked at Eddie and said in a sweet voice, Let me introduce ourselves first. We're Family Cal's K2. I'm Crimson 11. Crimson 10. Crimson 9. The other 2 K2 spoke separately. Little brother, I advise you not to put up a pointless struggle. Crimson 11 continued. Eddie didn't answer. He seemed to be talking to himself. What should I do? What else can we do? Do it. As if following Toxin's violent response, Eddie growled slightly. His body quickly changed and expanded. A dark cuticle appeared. Armed explosive muscles and a terrifying shell covered his original human body. Go. Faced with this situation, the 3 K2 looked at each other. They didn't say anything and joined forces to attack. Their reaction was fast, efficient, and useful. A fierce battle unfolded in the quiet streets of New York City in the dead of night. Chapter 315. Sigh, I can't believe Team F ran into them. They got lucky. I wanted to see how powerful the symbiotic extraterrestrial entity that Family Master is interested in is. Once Crimson 9 and the others make a move, we won't have a chance. After receiving the message of Team F's encounter, teams of carts wearing black leather jackets and devil masks appeared from time to time in some dark corners or rooftops in New York City. After feeling sorry for them, they quickly rushed to the street where their target was. In less than 10 minutes, almost 4 teams of carts arrived at the scene where the message was sent. After greeting each other, they looked around the quiet street in the middle of the night with vigilance. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Shouldn't there be a battle between transcendents going on? Why was there no one in sight? It was so eerily silent. Did Crimson 9 and the others get rid of the target so quickly? Carts Hong 18 said in surprise. Over there. I detected signs of life. Another Carts who was wearing a detection device said as he pointed at a dark alley. Swoosh, swoosh. A few carts flashed and moved 10 meters away. They arrived at the entrance of the alley in an instant. They followed the dim yellow light and looked inside. The scene in front of them made their pupils shrink and they all gasped in unison. The solid walls on both sides of the narrow alley between 2 buildings had completely collapsed. The cement floor was full of bumpy giant footprints. Traces of guns, swords, and fists were everywhere. It was as if this place had been baptized by an inhuman battle. Crimson 9, the leader of Family Cal Team F, was covered in wounds and blood. He was lying in a 2-meter deep hole in the middle of the alley with his arms and legs spread out. His high-quality alloy sword was bent and broken. One of them was stuck in the hole. Crimson 10, on the other hand, was submerged in a pile of rubble and broken tiles. One of his hands, which had already been crushed, reached out from the pile of rubble and drooped down weakly. The Barrett sniper rifle beside him had already been crumpled into a pile of scrap metal. The only female in Team F, Crimson 11, was wearing a tattered black leather jacket that revealed her fair skin. Her slender body was stuck in the outer wall of the third floor of the building. Her devil mask was long gone, and the light in her beautiful eyes was gone. She looked like she had been broken. This was simply an unbearable sight to behold. The three trainers quickly stepped forward without hesitation and gathered the trainers of Team F together. After checking them one by one, Crimson 5, who was the leader of Team B, let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they're only seriously injured and have lost their ability to fight. There's no danger to their lives. Crimson 15 said incredulously, "It's only been 8 minutes since Team F's call was sent to us and we've arrived here." In such a short period of time, the 3 members of Team F were severely injured and on the verge of death? No. Crimson 5's face was solemn as he judged. If it wasn't for Crimson 9 and the others, ordinary soldiers would have died a long time ago. The group of Ka-2 apprentices fell into silence. They couldn't be more shocked. They used to be at the forefront of human evolution on Earth. Whether it was mutation or technology, they were far behind others. This was also the reason why Ka-2 could rule the underground world of Earth for more than 10 years. In previous missions, whether it was the Mafia, the Assassin Organization, or the National Organization, they were all crushed by Ka-Tuesday. But tonight, there was only one enemy. The 3 trainers couldn't even hold on for 10 minutes. One of the trainers said, "This is too exaggerated." What kind of monster did they encounter? Not only him but all the trainers on the field had the same question. Of course, Kale was very willing to see Ka-2's collective defeat. Living on Earth in peaceful times for a long time, people would become more and more conservative. Before the alien invasion war came, he wanted to let Ka-2 know that there was always someone better than them. It was also a real practice to deal with the alien invasion. On the other side, on the street next to where the battle took place, on the rooftop of a tall building, under the cover of the cold night, a humanoid dark monster was repeatedly sprinting and jumping. It used the dozens of meters tall skyscrapers as stepping stones to escape in the air. It was obviously injured. Along the way it spilled drops of dark liquid. Toxin asked with a hoarse voice, "Why didn't you kill those 3 people? They can hurt me. Such a strong enemy should be given respect and bite off their heads." Didn't you see it clearly? They are from the unnatural firm. Compared to them, you and I are the complete villains. How many times do I have to tell you to understand this? Eddie replied in a bad mood. Toxin said proudly, "Then why should we run? With their strength, even if a few more of them came, they wouldn't be able to compete with me." "What if the symbol of peace came?" Eddie asked. The symbol of peace. Toxin's voice became weak when he heard this name. As long as one came to New York City, everyone knew that there was an undefeated legendary hero here. Although they believed in their own strength, the legend of the symbol of peace was too frightening. The people preached and defended it as if it was a human god. Toxin paused and said stubbornly, "If we can't beat them, we can just run." TSK? Eddie didn't say anything. He sprinted on the rooftop of a tall building and was about to jump to the building across the street. He jumped out of the building and reached the highest point. He was 50 meters in the air. Eddie's face changed drastically. A strong gravitational force pulled him down to the ground. What is this? Toxin was also caught off guard. The humanoid monster in the symbiotic state fell straight down. "We're going to hit the ground. Do something." Eddie shouted in fear. His limbs swayed freely in the strong wind that was blowing upwards. In his field of vision, the road below was getting closer and closer. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters. It's not that simple. Toxin sneered when he saw that he was about to hit the ground. He controlled his body and waved his hand forward. His dark arms stretched out like rubber and grabbed the edge of the window on the 10th floor of the building in front of him. Gotcha. He pulled down the window frame and kicked the wall of the 7th floor like a swing. His strong arms stabbed into the wall to slow down the speed of his fall. Gotcha. He plowed down the outer wall of the building that was more than 10 meters tall. Eddie violently stomped on the wall of the building and bent the metal lamp post by the side of the road with his palm. He landed in the middle of the empty road without any damage. "Who's behind this?" Eddie glanced around. His voice was hoarse, domineering, and indifferent. "It's not that easy to deal with. A woman's voice came from behind a tree on the side of the road. A beautiful green-haired girl in a man's shirt and suit walked out with elegant steps. Her pale hands were covered in green mist and her gem-like eyes were filled with joy. She finally found an opponent who could amuse her while her boss was away. Chapter 316. It was 3 o'clock in the morning on a deserted road in New York. Eddie, who was covered in toxin, and Luna, who was using her force field, were facing each other across the wide road. If it was based on physical appearance, there was no doubt that the ferocious, burly, and ugly Eddie had the upper hand. But at this moment, Luna, a young and beautiful Western girl, was not inferior to him in terms of presence. Be careful, Eddie. This human girl is not an ordinary person. Toxin warned in Eddie's mind. Eddie shrugged and said in a low voice, "That's what you said about the 3 K2s just now. It's different." Toxin's tone was unprecedentedly serious. Its hoarse and cold words echoed in Eddie's mind and heart. The woman who came this time is much stronger than those humans who called themselves K2s. How strong? Is she stronger than the symbiotic demon called Bailey? Eddie's body was tense and motionless. Luna's delicate figure was reflected in his omniscient eye. In his mind, Bailey was already the strongest inhuman opponent. It's hard to say. Based on my feeling, her combat power is only higher than the symbiotic demon. Toxin did not exaggerate or belittle itself this time. It analyzed objectively based on its perception. It shared a human body with Eddie. Unlike the previous hosts, it did not forcefully seize control of the body. Instead, it gave control of the body back to Eddie. After all, the host and the parasite did not reject each other. Only then could the symbiotic demon unleash its true power. All right, then I know what to do. Leave it to me. Eddie nodded as he clenched his fist and stared at Luna, who was in front of him. What do you know? Toxin was a little confused. It originally wanted to add some words of comfort and guidance. But now it seemed that this host had the potential to be trained into a strong person. Are you ready to go? Luna also secretly raised both of her hands. The light effect on her palms pulsated slightly. She was ready to fight with her mutant ability at any time. Of course it's a battle plan. Run. Before she could finish her sentence, Eddie suddenly turned around and stomped on the ground with its back facing Luna. The cement ground immediately cracked and left a hole. Its slightly bloated dark body quickly ran past the greenery on the road and fled to the other side of the road without looking back. This dramatic turn of events not only stunned Luna, who was ready to fight, but even Toxin, who was one with Eddie, felt its face was burning. Why are you running with my transformation? Toxin's mentality was exploding. Didn't you said to run if you can't beat it? Eddie answered as if it was a matter of course. His legs were running at lightning speed, and he did not show any signs of hesitation. We haven't even started yet. Poison was speechless. This was the first time he had seen such a cowardly host. So be it. Toxin silently acquiesced and did not resist in his heart. His cowardly nature seemed to have been exposed openly by Eddie. Eddie had just fled 100 meters away when his ears twitched. He heard the sound of wind breaking behind him. His reflexes made a quick judgment. He lowered his head slightly and shifted his body half a step to the left. Just as he did this, the metal pole of the street lamp missed and brushed past Eddie's shoulder. It was like an extended spear that was nailed into the ground 3 meters away. The strong penetrating force caused the pointless metal pole to sink halfway into the ground. The end of the pole was still vibrating slightly. If it hits, I'm afraid someone will die. Eddie swallowed his saliva and was about to go around the metal pole to continue his escape. However, at the next moment, Luna's figure descended from the sky. The end of the metal pole was bent into a circle, allowing Luna to stand on it with one foot. The green mist on her hands shone brightly as she looked down at the repulsive Eddie. Eddie smiled bitterly and asked in a low voice, "Toxin, can we fly?" "You think too much. Get ready to fight." Toxin mercilessly interrupted Eddie's thoughts of continuing his escape. Luna looked at Eddie and said coldly, "When I first saw you, I mistook you for the family master. I didn't expect you to be an alien disguised as the family master." Toxin's and Venom's appearances were too similar. The only difference was the lines on the surface of the body and the color of the eyes on the face. "Family master?" Eddie's hands shook and his tongue swayed. He explained with a hoarse voice, "I think you've misunderstood. I'm actually a good person." "Good person? Weren't you the one who detonated the gas and blew up a residential building tonight?" Luna's beautiful eyes were cold. Well? Eddie awkwardly scratched his head. Weren't you the one who injured K2? Luna continued to ask. Well, Eddie was sweating profusely. He couldn't finish a complete sentence. He had done too many evil things with Toxin. This time he couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. I told you not to dream about being a hero. It's good to be a villain. Toxin comforted in a low voice. I'm a good young man in society. Why would I be a villain? Eddie still wanted to argue with Toxin, but Luna obviously wouldn't give him the chance. Her hands seemed to rotate according to some kind of trajectory. Her ability was displayed in reality along with the surging of the green mist. Magnetic field control. The nearest metal object on the road was the lampposts on the side of the road. With Luna as the center, 3 lampposts within 20 meters buzzed and vibrated. They were forcefully pulled out from the ground by force and flew towards Eddie with electric wires that were radiating in all directions. Toxin was in a state of alert. A black tentacle jumped out and stuck to the ground 10 meters away. It pulled Eddie away from the attacking metal poles. Luna flipped her hands and controlled the 3 streetlight poles to adjust their positions in the air. A lamppost plunged into the ground from top to bottom, just in time to cut off the black tentacles that were dragging Eddie. Eddie fell to the ground and rolled a few times. The second lamppost blocked his escape route, forcing his body to stop between the 2 lampposts. Then the 3rd streetlight pole shot towards Eddie's chest like a homing missile. Stop right there. Eddie growled and blocked in front of his body like a shield. He grabbed the front end of the metal pole in time and stopped it about 3 centimeters in front of his chest. It's over. Luna waved her hand slightly, and a lamp post pierced through the air under the cover of darkness. Like a black flowing light, it went straight for Eddie's defenseless neck. She controlled 4 streetlight poles, but 3 of them were in the light and 1 was hidden in the dark. Attacking at the same time was the key to victory. Eddie held the 3rd metal pole with both hands. He watched the last one approaching him. At the critical moment he suddenly opened his mouth. Crack. Eddie bit the metal pole with his broken teeth. Under the force, even the iron was as fragile as tofu. Luna was shocked. She had never seen such hard teeth. Now it's my turn. Eddie spat out the iron slag and roared like a monster. He stepped forward with the metal pole in his hand. It was completely different from his previous cowardice. Knowing that he couldn't escape, he decided to fight back. Chapter 317. If he didn't explode in silence, he would die in silence. Fight. With this thought, Eddie's body and mind completely turned into a monster. He angrily held the metal pole of the street lamp and launched a violent counterattack. Under the buff of the toxin, his muscle strength, nerve speed, and explosive jumping ability all increased by dozens of times. In terms of physique, he was only inferior to the strongest creature on land, Hulk. In just a split second, Eddie stomped on the ground all the way. His tall and burly dark body whistled as he approached Luna, who was much smaller in size than him. What a pity. Luna sighed, looking at the approaching Eddie. Her hands nimbly rotated, the green fog smoothing out the turbulent air waves in the air. She didn't feel pity for herself but for Eddie. Relying on the advantage of an extraordinary body to close the distance and counterattack, this was naturally the correct choice in battle, but why did he mindlessly choose the metal pole as his weapon? One had to know. Wanting to use metal to hurt an ability user with magnetic field control, this was simply the delusion of an ignorant person. Luna didn't move to dodge and calmly used her ability. When Eddie was only 5 meters away from her, the metal pole suddenly bent in the opposite direction, as if it had turned into a living iron snake. The end of the metal pole wrapped around Eddie's arm, and the end bent down, changing shape and coiling around his waist and knees. This is... Eddie and the toxin were shocked, and a few subtle sounds of wind breaking came from behind them again. Crack, 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 crack. 4 metal poles of street lamps fell from the sky, more than half of them inserted into the hard concrete ground, forming a narrow square prison on the ground, surrounding the symbiotic Eddie, who was bound by the metal poles as a rope. Now it's truly over. Luna's tone was cold and didn't give Eddie a chance to react. She jumped off the metal pole she had been stepping on, using her ability to pull it out of the ground, and waved it at the 4 metal poles. Clang! The 4 metal poles that formed the temporary prison hummed and vibrated under the sudden impact, and together with the ear-piercing and dull noise. It's over. Eddie's eyes were filled with fear. He didn't expect that the other party would even know that symbiotic organisms were afraid of ultrasound. The corners of Luna's mouth curved into a wonderful arc, but after 3 seconds her smile faded and was replaced by a dignified and serious expression. It was the sound of several metal rods vibrating. Even she was a little impatient, but Eddie, who was facing the sound waves inside the cage, was still standing in the same place, unharmed. You're okay? Eddie was also a little confused as he asked Poison happily. I forgot to tell you. I'm different from the other symbiotic demons. I don't have the weakness of fire and ultrasound. After Toxin finished speaking, he took control of Eddie's body online. His hands stretched outwards, and the metal rod rope as thick as his wrist was easily torn apart. Not good. Luna frowned slightly. She pressed down with both hands, and the 4 metal bars that formed the cage immediately bent inwards, fiercely slamming into Eddie. I've already figured out your ability, human. Eddie growled in a low voice. His feet slammed downwards and like a giant cannonball, he used his head to smash through the metal bars. Under the violent and powerful force, even the metal bars connected to the ground protruded out of the ground. He was like a beast that had been released from its cage. His entire body was filled with a violent aura. He picked up a piece of cracked ground from the road and used all his strength to smash it towards Luna. So what? Luna laughed instead. It was easy to figure out her ability, but to find a way to deal with it was another story. He saw her spread her hands outwards, and the cement ground that was flying at high speed came to an abrupt stop. It was incomparably strange as it stagnated in midair. Luna's delicate hand waved and a green light glowed, and the piece of ground flew back in the opposite direction. Poison controlled Eddie to throw a punch, smashing the rock into pieces. He looked at Luna in disbelief. How can this be? Not only can you control metal, you can even control stone? Don't you know? The cement roads in the big cities are made of reinforced concrete. Eddie helplessly reminded. Correct, but there's no reward. Luna raised her hands and her beautiful eyes flashed with a green light. The road shook violently as if there was an earthquake. At the same time, many cracks appeared on the surface, and soon the steel bars below were densely packed and suspended. This is big trouble, this is her home ground. Eddie bitterly said, looking at the metal objects that blocked the road, and the night view of the tall modern buildings in the surrounding big cities. Modern cities, the thing that they didn't lack the least was metal, especially the popular iron metal. This was the so-called Steel City. Poison fell into silence and deeply agreed. I've crossed the Milky Way and been to many places in the universe, but this is the first time I've seen such an incomprehensible ability. A small planet like Earth actually has this kind of ability. It's too abnormal, too monstrous. Those alien races that call themselves the light of science and technology will go crazy if they encounter it. Poison was not stingy with his praise, even though his appearance looked more like a monster in the eyes of outsiders. Magnetic field control. Any metal objects couldn't hurt ability users, and in the blink of an eye, she could tyrannically plunder metal equipment and use it for her own use. This was clearly the nemesis of science and technology. After all, most of science and technology was built on metal manufacturing. Poison, what should we do now? Eddie sighed and asked. What else can we do? At least don't lose so badly. Poison returned the body's initiative back to Eddie. Can't win, really can't win. The opponent's ability was too much of a bully. Eddie braced himself and continued to charge forward. After resisting stubbornly for 5 minutes, he ran out of energy and withdrew from the full coverage state. His limbs were bound by thick iron chains made of various kinds of metal, and he was locked to the building next to the road. 10 meters away. The green mist on Luna's hands dissipated, and her eyes showed exhaustion. Her face was pale from exhaustion, and her short dark green hair and white shirt were wet with sweat. Under the silver moonlight, it added a bit of sexy charm. In this battle, although she relied on her powerful ability to suppress and win, it was far from as easy as it looked. To subdue Eddie, who was in the full coverage state of poison, even the magnetic field control was very difficult. She had to maintain a highly tense state of mind until now. Even her mental strength was almost exhausted. But at least I didn't embarrass the boss. Luna heaved a sigh of relief, dialed the communication device, and wanted to send her location to the headquarters of the law firm, and let K2 come to clean up. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Just then a cold night wind blew. Luna looked to the side vigilantly and found that it was a blonde lowly. She didn't know when she had been standing alone under the shade of a tree by the roadside. Her black pupils were coldly staring at her and the unconscious Eddie. Noticing Luna looking at her, the blonde little girl cracked a stiff and terrifying smile. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.